In the quiet neighborhoods of East Harlem, New York, during the early decades of the 20th century, life for Italian-American families was a mixture of hard work, tradition, and survival. Among these families was the Miranda household, a modest yet tightly knit family that would unknowingly contribute a figure to one of the most secretive and formidable crime organizations in American history. Michele Miranda, born in 1896 in Sicily, immigrated to the United States as a young boy. Like many Italian immigrants of that time, his life was framed by the struggle to adapt to a foreign land while maintaining the cultural threads that tied him to his Sicilian heritage. Miranda's early years in New York were far from glamorous. He grew up in a world of crowded tenements, narrow streets, and the constant presence of both opportunity and danger. While some children played carefree in the alleys, Michele observed the hustle and survival instincts of the men in his neighborhood, men who would do anything to protect their families and carve out a place in a society that often looked at them with suspicion. From a young age, Michele developed a quiet and observant nature, learning to understand people through subtle gestures and unspoken cues. This would later become one of his defining traits. As he entered his teenage years, Michele began to gravitate toward the social circle that, while shadowed in secrecy, wielded considerable influence in the community. He was not the type to seek the spotlight. Instead, he cultivated a reputation for loyalty, discretion, and intelligence. These qualities did not go unnoticed. By the 1920s, when prohibition swept across the United States, and organized crime seized the opportunity to profit from the illegal alcohol trade, Michele found himself increasingly involved in the operation of what would become known as the Genovese crime family. During these formative years, Michele's role was not one of violence or public notoriety. Unlike some of his contemporaries, he rarely sought to be feared or celebrated. His power was subtle, rooted in strategy, knowledge, and the trust he inspired in those around him. He understood that in the world of organized crime, influence often mattered more than brute force. By carefully observing rival factions, internal dynamics, and law enforcement tendencies, Michele learned to navigate a complex and dangerous environment without drawing unnecessary attention to himself. The Prohibition era, with its rampant corruption and booming black market trade, provided Michele with both a playground and a proving ground. He managed logistical operations, mediated disputes, and ensured that the family's interests were protected with minimal exposure. His skill in negotiation and conflict resolution earned him a reputation as someone who could be trusted to handle delicate situations. Unlike the flashy gangsters whose exploits would be splashed across newspapers, Michele's victories were quiet, strategic, and often invisible to the public eye. By the 1930s, the Genovese family had established itself as one of the most powerful criminal organizations in New York City, and Michele Miranda had become a respected figure within its ranks. It was during this period that he began to fully embody the role that would define him for decades to come. The consigliere, the trusted advisor who worked behind the scenes to guide the family's decisions. As consigliere, Michele's responsibilities extended far beyond simple administrative duties. He advised the boss on strategy, mediated disputes among members, and ensured that the family operated efficiently and profitably while minimizing exposure to law enforcement. Michele's approach to leadership was calculated and methodical. He recognized that the stability and longevity of the family depended on careful planning, foresight, and the ability to maintain loyalty among members. Where some leaders might rely on intimidation and fear to command respect, Michele relied on wisdom, discretion, and unwavering loyalty. Those who worked with him understood that he valued the long-game decisions that might seem minor or bureaucratic on the surface were often part of a larger, meticulously crafted strategy designed to preserve the family's power and influence. The quiet nature of Michele Miranda did not mean he was without presence. In meetings, his voice was calm and deliberate, carrying weight precisely because it was measured and thoughtful. Associates knew that when Michele spoke, it was time to listen. Unlike more impulsive figures who acted on emotion, he weighed every option, considered the consequences, and provided counsel that balanced ambition with caution. It was this rare combination of intelligence, patience, and moral code within the criminal world that earned him respect not only from allies but from rivals as well. Michele's influence extended beyond internal family matters. He cultivated relationships with other organized crime figures, politicians, and law enforcement officials. These connections, carefully nurtured over years, allowed the Genovese family to operate with a level of protection and foresight that many other families could only envy. Yet even with this network, Michele remained in the shadows. He never sought personal recognition or public acclaim. His satisfaction came from seeing the family thrive and knowing that his guidance had contributed to its enduring strength. By 1957, Michele Miranda's quiet but powerful presence had solidified his place as the consigliere of the Genovese family. He had survived decades of change, conflict, and scrutiny, adapting to each challenge with patience and precision. In a world defined by violence and uncertainty, Michele's story served as a testament to the power of intelligence, discretion, and loyalty. The man who moved silently through the streets of East Harlem had become one of the most influential figures in the New York underworld, respected by allies, feared by rivals, and remembered as a master strategist who understood the delicate balance between power and survival. As we settle into the story of Michele Miranda, it is important to remember that the greatest power often lies not in the gun or the fist, but in the mind. In the chapters to come, we will explore the intricacies of his rise, the challenges he faced, the critical decisions that shaped the Genovese family, and the legacy he left behind. A legacy defined by quiet control, unmatched wisdom, and an unassuming but unbreakable authority in the shadowy world of organized crime. As the 1940s dawned, New York City was a city of contrast, bustling streets and booming neighborhoods juxtaposed with shadowy alleys where power quietly shifted hands. For Michele Miranda, these years were a period of quiet ascension, a time when his meticulous mind and unwavering loyalty would earn him greater influence within the Genovese crime family. Unlike some of his peers who sought visibility through daring acts or violent displays, Michele operated in the shadows, mastering the art of influence without attracting unnecessary attention. During this decade, the Genovese family itself was undergoing significant transformation. With the death of certain older figures and the shifting alliances among rival families, opportunity arose for those who could navigate the complex web of loyalties, rivalries, and power dynamics. Michele Miranda, with his sharp mind and patient approach, recognized the importance of timing, discretion, and diplomacy. He understood that to rise in the underworld, one had to be both a keen observer and a trusted confidant, qualities that Michele possessed in abundance. Michele's rise in the 1940s was not sudden or flashy. It was deliberate and calculated. He began taking on more responsibilities, often acting as a mediator in dispute between family members or negotiating terms with other crime organizations. These were delicate situations, requiring both tact and authority. Michele's calm demeanor and strategic thinking made him the ideal figure for such tasks. He understood the delicate balance of power within the family and knew when to assert influence and when to step back, allowing events to unfold naturally. One of the critical factors in Michele Miranda's growing power was his exceptional ability to analyze human behavior. In a world where trust was scarce and betrayal common, Michele could read intentions, predict reactions, and anticipate challenges. His counsel was sought not only by the family boss but also by other influential members who recognized that Michele's advice was rooted in careful study rather than impulsive emotion. This ability to combine foresight with discretion became a hallmark of his leadership style. While Michele was steadily gaining prominence, the larger context of the 1940s also played a role in shaping his path. World War II brought significant social and economic changes to New York City, altering the criminal landscape. With rationing, government contracts, and the movement of resources, organized crime found new opportunities to expand its operations. Michele's approach during this period was pragmatic. He ensured that the family's ventures, whether in gambling, loan sharking, or labor racketeering, remained profitable, while carefully avoiding unnecessary exposure to law enforcement. It was also during this time that Michele began to solidify his reputation as a voice of reason within the family. Where some leaders reacted impulsively to challenges or perceived slights, Michele advocated for measured responses. He understood that impulsive actions could provoke retaliation or law enforcement scrutiny, endangering not just individuals but the entire organization. By promoting strategic patience, he helped the family navigate tense situations that might have otherwise escalated into violent conflict. Michele's influence extended beyond internal family matters. He cultivated relationships with other crime families in New York and beyond, ensuring that the Genovese family maintained a network of alliances that could be relied upon in times of crisis. His skill in diplomacy and negotiation allowed the family to expand its operations, while avoiding unnecessary wars with rivals. Unlike the more notorious figures whose actions were driven by ego or reputation, Michele's decisions were guided by long-term planning and a deep understanding of the delicate ecosystem of organized crime. During the 1940s, Michele also became increasingly involved in labor racketeering, a field that would become one of the family's most lucrative and enduring enterprises. By controlling unions and leveraging influence over workers and employers, the Genovese family could generate significant income while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. Michele's role was often behind the scenes, ensuring that negotiations were conducted smoothly, disputes resolved quietly, and the family's interests protected. His ability to operate in the shadows while controlling critical levers of power further solidified his reputation as a master strategist. Despite the dangerous nature of his work, Michele maintained a low profile. He avoided public attention, preferring to let others act as the visible face of the family while he guided decisions from behind the scenes. This approach not only protected him from law enforcement scrutiny but also enhanced his mystique. Within the family, he became known as the Quiet Consigliere, a figure whose influence was undeniable but whose presence rarely drew the spotlight. Those who underestimated him often found themselves outmaneuvered, their miscalculations quietly corrected by Michele's strategic insight. By the late 1940s, Michele Miranda had become an indispensable figure within the Genovese crime family. His advice was sought on matters ranging from financial operations to personnel decisions, and his guidance was often the difference between success and failure in high-stakes situations. Associates and rivals alike recognized that Michele's strength lay not in overt aggression but in his ability to orchestrate complex strategies, anticipate challenges, and maintain stability within a volatile world. As we reflect on Michele Miranda's rise during the 1940s, it becomes clear that his path was defined by patience, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to the family. In a world dominated by violence, ego, and fleeting fame, Michele carved out a unique role for himself. One quiet authority outweighed brash action, and careful planning surpassed reckless ambition. His story reminds us that in the shadows of power, influence often takes the form of subtlety, strategy, and the ability to see the larger picture when others are blinded by immediate desires. The 1940s set the stage for Michele's later years, including the pivotal period of 1957 when he would fully assume the role of consigliere and guide the Genovese family through some of the most challenging and defining moments in its history. His experiences during these formative years shaped not only his approach to leadership but also the legacy of wisdom, discretion, and quiet power that he would leave behind, a legacy that continues to capture the fascination of those who study the intricate world of organized crime. As the 1950s unfolded, New York's underworld was at a crossroads. The era of prohibition had long ended, but the criminal landscape had evolved into a complex network of gambling operations, labor rackets, extortion schemes, and narcotics trafficking. Amid this shifting terrain, Michele Miranda had solidified his reputation as the quiet, calculating force whose advice and strategy were indispensable to the Genovese family. By now, his experience and steady hand had become a cornerstone of the family's continued dominance. The decade began with the Genovese family adapting to new forms of opportunity and threat. Rivalries among the five families were ongoing, and law enforcement agencies were becoming more sophisticated in their investigations of organized crime. For Michele Miranda, this meant that every decision required foresight, subtlety, and a careful weighing of risks. His role had expanded from mediator and strategist to that of a guiding influence in high-stakes decision-making, ensuring that the family maintained its power while avoiding the attention that could unravel years of careful planning. Michele's approach to consolidating power was methodical. He understood that the survival of the family depended not just on force or intimidation, but on loyalty, organization, and influence across multiple sectors of society. He continued to strengthen the family's control over labor unions, a domain that offered both income and leverage, by carefully placing trusted associates in key positions and negotiating quietly with union leaders. Michele ensured that the Genovese family could influence industries ranging from construction to shipping. These operations required patience, negotiation, and the ability to manage personalities, traits that Michele had honed over decades. One of Michele Miranda's most notable skills during this period was his ability to maintain internal cohesion. The 1950s were marked by disputes within families and the threat of betrayal from ambitious members seeking to advance their own positions. Michele, as the consigliere, acted as the ultimate arbiter. He listened, advised, and often subtly redirected conflicts before they could escalate into violence. His calm demeanor and reputation for fairness earned him respect even from those who might have been tempted to challenge the hierarchy. Under his guidance, the family avoided internal fragmentation, maintaining stability in a world where disorder could be deadly. The year 1957 would prove to be a pivotal moment in Michele's career, but the years leading up to it were a time of quiet yet decisive action. He carefully positioned the Genovese family to withstand both external and internal pressures. He strengthened alliances with other families, maintained discreet channels of communication with law enforcement and political figures, and ensured that the family's revenue streams remained robust. This period of strategic consolidation reflected Michele's understanding that power was not merely seized, it was built, nurtured, and protected over time. Michele also played a critical role in maintaining the family's public invisibility. Unlike some notorious gangsters whose names appeared in newspapers and sensationalist reports, Michele operated in the shadows. His presence was felt through the results of his strategies rather than his public persona. Associates and rivals alike understood that his quiet counsel carried immense weight. Decisions taken with Michele's guidance were often meticulous, minimizing risk, while maximizing profit and influence. In a world where impulsive action could be fatal, his measured approach became a defining characteristic of the Genovese family's operation. During this decade, Michele's network of trusted allies expanded. He cultivated relationships with both emerging and established figures within the criminal underworld, creating a web of loyalty that strengthened the family's influence. This network also extended into legitimate spheres of society, including businesses, unions, and political circles. By operating at the intersection of legal and illegal enterprises, Michele ensured that the family's reach was both deep and resilient, able to adapt to changing circumstances without compromising its stability. The quiet power of Michele Miranda also lay in his understanding of timing. He recognized that patience was often more effective than immediate action. Where others might react impulsively to slights or opportunities, Michele weighed consequences carefully, assessing both short-term gains and long-term risks. This strategic patience allowed the family to avoid unnecessary conflict, maintain alliances, and exploit opportunities with precision. His ability to think several steps ahead made him not only a respected advisor, but a figure whose counsel was often decisive in critical moments. As the 1950s progressed, Michele's influence became increasingly institutionalized within the family structure. The role of consigliere was not merely ceremonial. It was the linchpin of internal governance and strategic planning. Michele oversaw financial operations, guided succession planning, and ensured that disputes were resolved discreetly and effectively. His guidance helped the family navigate external threats, including law enforcement scrutiny and challenges from rival factions, while simultaneously managing the ambitions and grievances of its own members. By the mid-1950s, Michele Miranda was recognized as one of the most reliable and intelligent figures in organized crime. His reputation was built not on fear or flamboyance, but on trust, wisdom, and the consistent delivery of results. Those who underestimated him often discovered that his quiet approach masked a formidable understanding of power, influence, and human behavior. Michele had learned that in the world of organized crime, subtlety and discretion could be more effective than violence or public notoriety. This period also set the stage for the events that would define Michele Miranda's legacy. In 1957, a series of significant developments would solidify his position as the consigliere and elevate the Genovese family to a level of control and sophistication that few other organizations could match. The groundwork laid throughout the 1950s through careful negotiation, strategic alliances, and the cultivation of loyalty demonstrated Michele's mastery of long-term planning and the quiet accumulation of power. As we reflect on Michele Miranda's consolidation of influence in the 1950s, it becomes clear that his story is one of strategy, patience, and the subtle exercise of authority. Unlike figures driven by ego or violence, Michele's strength lay in his ability to see the larger picture, anticipate challenges, and guide decisions with a steady hand. His role during this decade exemplifies the principle that true power often operates silently, shaping outcomes and determining futures without fanfare or public recognition. By the end of the 1950s, Michele Miranda had not only secured his position within the Genovese family, but had also set a standard for what it meant to wield influence with intelligence and discretion. The quiet consigliere had become a master strategist, capable of steering one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history through the turbulent waters of mid-20th century New York, ensuring its survival, growth, and dominance. The year 1957 stands as one of the most defining periods in the history of organized crime in New York City, and for Michele Miranda, it marked the culmination of decades of quiet preparation and strategic maneuvering. By this time, Miranda had established himself as the trusted consigliere of the Genovese family, a role that placed him at the heart of critical decisions, mediating conflicts, guiding operations, and shaping the long-term strategy of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. In 1957, the landscape of organized crime was undergoing a significant transformation. Law enforcement, emboldened by new investigative techniques and the rising visibility of organized crime, began to scrutinize the five families more closely than ever before. At the same time, internal power struggles and shifting alliances created an environment of both opportunity and danger. It was within this tense, high-stakes context that Michele Miranda's skills as a strategist and mediator became most apparent. One of the defining features of Miranda's role during this year was his involvement in managing the family's internal dynamics. Genovese's family, like other criminal organizations, was not immune to ambition, jealousy, and disputes among members. Michele, as consigliere, acted as a stabilizing force, using his deep understanding of human behavior and his unmatched discretion to mediate disagreements before they escalated into open conflict. His presence ensured that internal cohesion was maintained, allowing the family to focus on operations and strategic expansion rather than being consumed by infighting. The 1950s were also a time of expansion for the family's operation, and Michele's guidance was critical in overseeing these ventures. Labor racketeering remained a cornerstone of the Genovese enterprise, and Michele carefully managed relationships with union leaders, business owners, and political figures to ensure smooth operation. He was adept at maintaining control without drawing attention, a skill that allowed the family to amass wealth while avoiding the legal and public scrutiny that could threaten their activities. Michele's influence extended beyond operational oversight. He played a key role in shaping the family's alliances with other organized crime groups by cultivating relationships with influential figures across the five families and even beyond New York. Miranda helped create a network of cooperation and mutual benefit. These alliances were essential in preventing conflict, coordinating operations, and strengthening the overall position of the Genovese family within the larger criminal ecosystem. Michele understood that strategic partnerships could be more powerful than violence, and his foresight ensured the family's stability and dominance. Perhaps the most notable event of 1957 was the infamous Appalachian meeting, which brought together top leaders of organized crime from across the United States. While Michele Miranda himself did not attend the meeting, the decisions made and the fallout from the gathering had profound implications for the Genovese family and for Miranda's role within it. The meeting's exposure to law enforcement heightened awareness of the organized crime network, prompting leaders like Michele to emphasize discretion and careful planning. His calm, measured approach during this crisis reinforced his reputation as the voice of reason and the guiding hand behind the family's operation. Michele's influence was not only about managing crises, but also about shaping long-term strategy. In 1957, he advised the family on succession, operational priorities, and risk management. His decisions were informed by decades of experience and a keen understanding of the delicate balance between power, loyalty, and legality. Where others might have acted impulsively or aggressively, Michele's counsel was characterized by patience, prudence, and foresight, qualities that ensured the family's continued survival and growth in an increasingly challenging environment. The quiet nature of Michele Miranda's authority became even more pronounced during this period. Unlike other figures who relied on fear, public persona, or flamboyant acts of violence, Miranda's power was rooted in intellect, discretion, and trust. Members of the family understood that his decisions were final, yet fair, and that his guidance was designed to protect both the organization and the individuals within it. This approach not only preserved the family's stability but also enhanced Miranda's stature as a leader whose influence could not be ignored. During 1957, Michele also worked behind the scenes to manage external threats, particularly from law enforcement and rebel organizations. His ability to anticipate investigations, monitor rival movements, and implement precautionary measures was critical in shielding the family from exposure and disruption. By blending strategic foresight with practical action, Miranda demonstrated that true power often lies in preparation and subtle influence rather than in overt displays of force. Another aspect of Michele's role in 1957 was the cultivation of loyalty and trust. Within any criminal organization, loyalty is fragile and betrayal can be catastrophic. Michele's approach was to foster an environment where respect, mutual benefit, and discretion were valued above personal ambition. By carefully mentoring key figures and guiding decision-making, he ensured that loyalty was rewarded and that ambitious members were steered toward actions that benefited the collective rather than individual agendas. As the year progressed, Michele Miranda's quiet authority became increasingly apparent not only to his own associates but also to rivals and observers. His influence shaped the trajectory of the Genovese family, ensuring that it remained a dominant force in the New York underworld. By combining strategic vision with meticulous attention to detail, Miranda demonstrated that leadership in organized crime was not solely about power or violence, but about intelligence, patience, and the ability to navigate a complex social ecosystem. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's role in 1957, it is clear that this year was more than just a milestone. It was a testament to the effectiveness of his approach. Through careful planning, strategic alliances, and the management of both internal and external pressures, he solidified his position as the quiet consigliere whose influence extended far beyond what was visible to the public eye. Michele's story in 1957 exemplifies the principle that true power operates silently, shaping outcomes and guiding decisions with precision and foresight. In understanding Michele Miranda's impact during this pivotal year, one gains insight into the subtle mechanisms of control and influence within organized crime. His ability to balance risk, manage relationships, and maintain stability amidst chaos highlight the The unique combination of intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking that defined his career. The events of 1957 serve as a crucial chapter in the story of the Genovese family, and Michele Miranda's role in guiding the family through this period cement his legacy as one of the most effective and respected figures in American organized crime history. By the end of 1957, Michele Miranda had proven that the quiet strategist could wield more lasting influence than the most visible and violent figures. His decisions, counsel, and foresight had strengthened the Genovese family's position, safeguarded its operations, and ensured that its influence would endure. Michele's legacy as the Quiet Consigliere was no longer just a reputation, it was a reality, forged through decades of careful observation, strategic planning, and unwavering commitment to the family's longevity and prosperity. Following the pivotal year of 1957, Michele Miranda's role as the Quiet Consigliere of the Genovese family became even more critical. By this time, he had not only secured his position as a trusted advisor, but had also established himself as one of the most influential figures in the New York underworld. Unlike many of his contemporaries, whose reputations were built on notoriety, intimidation, or violent exploits, Michele's power stemmed from intellect, foresight, and the ability to navigate a complex web of relationships, both within and outside the family. Miranda's leadership style was subtle yet profound. He understood that true authority in organized crime was not always demonstrated through force or public presence. Instead, he relied on careful observation, strategic counsel, and the cultivation of loyalty. Associates respected him not because they feared him, but because they trusted his judgment and recognized the wisdom behind his decisions. This trust allowed Michele to influence critical operations and guide the family through complex challenges with minimal resistance. A central aspect of Michele's leadership was his management of internal family dynamics. The Genovese family, like any large organization, was composed of individuals with varying ambitions, temperaments, and priorities. Conflicts were inevitable, and the potential for betrayal was ever present. Michele's role was to act as a mediator and strategist, resolving disputes before they escalated and ensuring that all actions aligned with the long-term goals of the family. His calm demeanor and reputation for fairness made him the ideal figure to maintain cohesion and prevent fractures within the organization. After 1957, the family's operations continued to expand and diversify, and Michele's guidance was instrumental in this growth. One of his key areas of focus was labor racketeering, which had become a significant source of revenue and influence for the Genovese family. Michele carefully oversaw the family's involvement in unions, negotiating discreetly with union leaders, employers, and political figures to maintain control and profitability. By blending diplomacy with strategic oversight, he ensured that operations ran smoothly while avoiding public scrutiny or legal entanglements. Michele Miranda also excelled at strategic planning beyond the immediate operations of the family. He had a remarkable ability to anticipate both opportunities and threats, often thinking several steps ahead of his peers. This foresight allowed the family to capitalize on profitable ventures while mitigating risks from law enforcement or rival organizations. In many ways, Michele functioned as the family's long-term strategist, ensuring that short-term action aligned with broader objectives and that every decision contributed to the family's enduring strength. Alliances with other crime families were another critical component of Michele's influence. In the post-1957 era, Michele worked diligently to cultivate relationships that would protect and advance the Genovese family's interests. These alliances were built on mutual respect, strategic necessity, and careful negotiation. By fostering collaboration and maintaining open lines of communication, Michele reduced the likelihood of conflict and created opportunities for coordinated ventures. His ability to navigate these complex networks demonstrated his exceptional understanding of power, loyalty, and the dynamics of organized crime. Despite the expansion of the family's operations and influence, Michele remained committed to discretion. Unlike more flamboyant figures who sought recognition or relied on fear, his authority was subtle, exercised behind the scenes. Associates understood that his guidance carried weight and that his counsel was often the deciding factor in major decisions. This approach allowed the family to operate effectively while minimizing exposure and maintaining an image of stability and cohesion. Michele's strategic mind also extended to interactions with law enforcement and political figures. He recognized that the family's survival depended not only on managing internal and external rivals but also on navigating the growing scrutiny of authorities. By cultivating relationships and understanding the mechanisms of law enforcement, Michele ensured that the family could continue its operations with minimal disruption. His ability to operate within the gray areas of legality demonstrated a level of sophistication and prudence that few of his contemporaries could match. Another hallmark of Michele Miranda's leadership was his emphasis on loyalty and mentorship. He recognized that the strength of the family relied on the loyalty of its members and the cultivation of capable associates. By mentoring younger members, guiding their decisions, and instilling the values of discretion and strategic thinking, Michele ensured the family's continuity and the preservation of its operational integrity. This long-term approach to leadership reflected his understanding that power was not just about control but about creating a stable, resilient organization capable of enduring challenges. Michele's influence was not confined to strategy, operations. It also shaped the family's culture and ethos. His approach emphasized patience, careful planning, and the intelligent exercise of authority. He valued discretion over spectacle, strategy over impulsiveness, and loyalty over personal gain. This philosophy permeated the organization, creating an environment in which members understood the importance of collective goals, thoughtful action, and the consequences of recklessness. In this way, Michele's leadership style became a defining feature of the Genovese family's identity. Even as Michele grew older, his role remained pivotal. He continued to advise on major decisions, mediate disputes, and ensure that the family navigated the complex landscape of organized crime with precision and foresight. Associates and rivals alike recognized his influence, often acknowledging that his guidance had shaped the trajectory of the family in ways that were subtle yet profound. Michele Miranda's quiet authority was a testament to the power of intellect, patience, and strategic insight in a world often defined by violence and impulsive action. The post-1957 era also highlighted Michele's resilience. The criminal underworld was dynamic and unpredictable, with constant threats from rival factions, law enforcement, and internal ambition. Michele's ability to maintain composure, analyze situations, and provide prudent guidance ensured that the Genovese family could adapt and thrive despite these challenges. His leadership demonstrated that stability and long-term success in organized crime required more than force. It required vision, patience, and a deep understanding of human behavior. As we reflect on Michele Miranda's influence in the years following 1957, it becomes clear that his legacy was defined not by notoriety or public recognition but by the quiet effectiveness of his counsel. He exemplified the principle that true power often operates in the shadows, shaping outcomes, guiding decisions, and preserving the integrity of an organization without drawing attention to itself. Michele's story illustrates that in the intricate world of organized crime, wisdom, discretion, and strategic thinking can be far more powerful than violence or spectacle. By the end of this period, Michele Miranda had firmly established himself as the indispensable consigliere of the Genovese family, a figure whose influence would resonate for decades to come. His leadership, characterized by intellect, foresight, and quiet authority, ensured that the family remained a dominant force in New York's underworld while cultivating a culture of loyalty, discretion, and strategic excellence. Michele's legacy was not written in headlines or sensational reports but in the enduring stability, power, and respect he commanded within one of America's most powerful crime organizations. In the world of organized crime, few figures were as respected or as enigmatic as Michele Miranda. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, his role as the quiet consigliere of the Genovese family had become synonymous with wisdom, discretion, and an almost unparalleled understanding of human nature. Unlike leaders who relied on fear or flamboyance, Michele's power stemmed from his philosophy, the belief that strategy, patience, and careful observation were more effective tools than violence or spectacle. His guiding principles shaped not only his personal actions but the culture and operations of the family he served. Michele's first principle was the importance of discretion. From the earliest days of his rise, he understood that visibility could be a liability. In a world where law enforcement scrutiny, rival factions, and internal betrayal were constant threats, Michele prioritized staying in the shadows. He avoided unnecessary attention, allowing others to be the visible face of the organization while he guided decisions behind the scenes. This approach not only protected him personally but also enhanced his influence as associate. Recognized that his counsel carried weight precisely because it was measured and deliberate. Closely linked to discretion was Michele's belief in patience. He recognized that impulsive action often led to unintended consequences, whether that meant provoking rivals, attracting law enforcement, or destabilizing internal operation. Michele's patience allowed him to analyze situations thoroughly, consider multiple outcomes, and implement strategies that maximize long-term benefits while minimizing risk. This measured approach earned him the reputation of a thinker, someone whose decisions were both practical and visionary, a rare combination in the violent and unpredictable world of organized crime. Another cornerstone of Michele Miranda's philosophy was the value of loyalty. In his eyes, loyalty was not simply a personal virtue but the foundation of organizational stability. He understood that without trust and allegiance, a criminal organization could fracture from internal rivalries and ambition. Michele cultivated loyalty through mentorship, consistent fairness, and by rewarding those who demonstrated commitment to the family's goals. At the same time, he skillfully neutralized threats from ambitious members, redirecting their energy toward endeavors that benefited the collective rather than individual gain. This balance of reward and subtle discipline strengthened the cohesion and resilience of the Genovese family. Michele also emphasized the strategic use of alliances. He recognized that power in the underworld was rarely absolute and that collaboration could often achieve what confrontation could not. Whether negotiating with other crime families, business leaders, or political figures, Michele approached alliances as calculated investments. Each relationship was carefully managed, ensuring mutual benefit while maintaining the family's autonomy and influence. His ability to navigate these networks of loyalty and obligation further solidified his reputation as a master strategist, someone whose insight extended far beyond the immediate operations of the family. Decision-making for Michele was always informed by foresight. He was acutely aware that every action, however small, could have cascading effects across the organization. Before advising on any operation or resolving any dispute, he considered not only immediate outcomes but also long-term implications. This ability to think multiple steps ahead allowed Michele to guide the family through complex challenges and avoid pitfalls that might have ensnared less perceptive leaders. Associates learned that when Michele spoke, it was the result of careful analysis and follow. His guidance was often synonymous with ensuring the family's continued success. Michele's philosophy extended to the management of risk. He understood that organized crime was inherently dangerous and that survival required more than brute strength. Michele consistently advocated for actions that balance potential gain with the probability of loss. Whether overseeing labor racketeering, negotiating with rival factions, or handling disputes within the family, he prioritized strategies that minimized exposure while preserving the family's position. This disciplined approach contributed significantly to the Genovese family's longevity, allowing it to thrive even under intense scrutiny and pressure. Even in matters of personal conduct, Michele mirrored the principles he applied professionally. He lived modestly, avoided unnecessary attention, and maintained relationship with associates based on respect and trust rather than fear. His quiet demeanor reinforced his role as an impartial advisor. Members knew that Michele's counsel was guided by principle and logic rather than ego or personal gain. This personal consistency enhanced his credibility, ensuring that his guidance was valued and respected across the organization. Michele's approach to conflict resolution exemplified his philosophy in action. Rather than resorting to violence as a first option, he preferred negotiation, mediation, and calculated compromise. He listened carefully, weighed the interests of all parties involved, and sought solutions that preserved relationships while advancing the family's objectives. This method reduced the likelihood of retaliation, maintained internal stability, and reinforced Michele's image as a rational and dependable figure whose judgment could be trusted even in the most high-stakes situations. Another element of Michele Miranda's guiding principles was his understanding of timing. He recognized that the success of any strategy often depended on executing it at the right moment. Whether coordinating operations, intervening in disputes, or addressing external threats, Michele's sense of timing was precise. He knew when to act, when to wait, and when to let events unfold naturally. This patience and strategic timing became one of his most effective tools, allowing him to achieve results that others, acting impulsively, might have jeopardized. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Michele Miranda's philosophy had become deeply ingrained in the Genovese family's operations and culture. Members were guided not only by directives but by an implicit understanding of discretion, loyalty, strategy, and patience. Michele's principles influenced decisions at every level of the organization, from day-to-day operations to long-term strategic planning. His legacy was not written in headlines or dramatic acts of violence but in the stability, cohesion, and strategic sophistication of the family he served. Michele's life and philosophy offer a unique perspective on leadership in the underworld. In a realm often dominated by force, intimidation, and impulsive ambition, Michele demonstrated that influence could be exercised quietly, strategically, and effectively. His guiding principles: discretion, patience, loyalty, alliances, foresight, risk management, and timing formed the backbone of his approach, allowing him to navigate the turbulent and dangerous world of organized crime with a remarkable combination of wisdom and effectiveness. As we reflect on Michele Miranda's philosophy and leadership during this era, it becomes evident that his success was not the result of brutality or spectacle but of intellect, strategy, and careful cultivation of relationships. His principles ensured the family's prosperity, minimized internal conflict, and safeguarded the organization from external threats. Michele's quiet mastery of strategy, coupled with his unwavering commitment to discretion and loyalty, firmly established him as one of the most influential and respected figures in the history of organized crime. In understanding Michele Miranda, one begins to see that the true power of a consigliere lies not in violence or intimidation but in the subtle and consistent application of wisdom, strategic thought, and human insight. His approach to leadership continues to serve as an example of how influence can be exercised silently yet decisively, shaping outcomes, preserving stability, and ensuring long-term success even in the most volatile and dangerous environments. By the 1960s, Michele Miranda had firmly established himself as the quiet, guiding force behind the Genovese family. His role as consigliere had evolved into one of unparalleled influence, requiring him to navigate a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and external pressures. The New York underworld was no longer a simple landscape of individual families. It had grown into a sophisticated ecosystem where strategic partnerships, loyalty, and careful negotiation determined the balance of power. Michele's skills, cultivated over decades, were critical in maintaining the family's dominance and ensuring its continued survival. One of Michele Miranda's most significant contributions during this period was his ability to cultivate and manage alliances with other organized crime figures. Unlike some contemporaries who relied on force or intimidation to assert dominance, Michele approached relationships with intelligence, patience, and foresight. He recognized that alliances were not merely conveniences but essential tools for maintaining stability, expanding influence, and preventing costly conflicts. By establishing trust and mutual respect, he created networks that strengthened the Genovese family's position both in New York and beyond. Michele's diplomacy extended across the 5 families of New York, the broader network of Italian-American crime organizations, and even to figures in other regions who held sway over important operations. Through careful negotiation and the strategic use of influence, he helped broker agreements that allowed families to coexist, share resources, and avoid unnecessary violence. These alliances were often delicate, requiring constant attention and subtle adjustment to account for shifting loyalties, changing circumstances, and emerging threats. Michele's ability to manage these dynamics quietly and effectively reinforced his reputation as a master strategist. While alliances were essential, so too were rivalries. Michele Miranda understood that power in the underworld always came with challenges from both internal and external sources. Ambitious members within the family, potential defectors, and rival bosses all posed potential threats to stability. Michele's approach to rivalries was characterized by caution, foresight, and discretion. He carefully assessed each situation, weighed potential risks and benefits, and implemented strategies designed to neutralize threats without triggering unnecessary violence or exposure. This measured approach often prevented conflicts from escalating and preserved the family's resources and cohesion. During the 1960s, Michele also played a critical role in managing the Genovese family's operations. Labor, racketeering, gambling, and various other ventures required constant oversight, negotiation, and problem-solving. Michele's ability to coordinate activities behind the scenes ensured that operations ran smoothly and that disputes were resolved quietly. He was often the unseen hand guiding decisions that would maximize profit, maintain order, and prevent disruption from law enforcement or rival factions. His strategic mind allowed him to balance the competing demands of efficiency, risk management, and loyalty within the organization. Michele's interactions with other major mob figures were guided by a blend of respect, subtlety, and strategic intent. He recognized that public confrontations or displays of force could weaken alliances or attract law enforcement attention. Instead, he cultivated relationships based on mutual benefit, often resolving disputes privately and ensuring that agreements were honored. His reputation for fairness, discretion, and intelligence made him a trusted intermediary, someone who could navigate delicate situations where others might fail. This skill not only strengthened the Genovese family, but also enhanced Michele's influence across the broader criminal network. The 1960s also brought increased scrutiny from law enforcement. Investigations into organized crime were becoming more sophisticated, fueled by emerging federal tools, informants, and surveillance techniques. Michele's approach to these pressures was rooted in careful planning and discretion. He emphasized minimizing exposure, ensuring that communications were secure, and that potentially incriminating activities were insulated from legal authorities. By maintaining operational secrecy and fostering a culture of caution within the family, Michele helped the Genovese organization navigate these challenges while continuing to grow its influence. Michele Miranda's leadership was also evident in his mentorship of younger members of the family. He understood that for the organization to endure, It needed capable leaders who shared his philosophy of discretion, strategy, and loyalty. Michele guided promising associates, teaching them not only the mechanics of operation, but also the subtler skills of negotiation, diplomacy, and human insight. This cultivation of talent ensured that the family maintained a pipeline of competent leadership capable of sustaining operations and protecting the family's interests over the long term. In addition to his operational and strategic responsibilities, Michele was deeply involved in managing internal communications and conflict resolution. The family structure required constant oversight to prevent misunderstandings, rivalries, or breaches of trust. Michele's calm and measured approach allowed him to mediate disputes effectively, often preventing conflicts from escalating into violence. His interventions were rarely public or dramatic. Instead, they were executed with subtlety and precision, reflecting his understanding that influence is often most powerful when it is invisible. Michele's ability to balance these multiple responsibilities, alliances, rivalries, operation, mentorship, and law enforcement pressures demonstrates the remarkable depth of his leadership. He was not a figure defined by spectacle or notoriety, but by quiet, consistent effectiveness. Associates knew that Michele's guidance was reliable, rational, and oriented toward long-term stability. His presence reassured allies, deterred potential threats, and shaped the decisions of the family in ways that were both strategic and enduring. By the end of the 1960s, Michele Miranda had solidified his reputation as one of the most intelligent and influential figures in the New York underworld. His ability to navigate complex social networks, manage rivalries, and maintain strategic oversight ensured that the Genovese family remained a dominant force. His quiet authority, grounded in discretion, foresight, and patience, distinguished him from more flamboyant or impulsive figures and reinforced the enduring power of the family. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's work in this decade, it becomes clear that his influence was profound precisely because it was subtle. He shaped the balance of power, guided operations, and fostered loyalty without relying on visibility, intimidation, or public acts of violence. Michele's approach demonstrates that in the intricate and often dangerous world of organized crime, true leadership is defined not by ego or spectacle, but by intelligence, strategy, and the ability to act decisively while remaining unseen. The story of Michele Miranda in the 1960s highlights the delicate art of power in the underworld. His combination of foresight, diplomacy, and discretion allowed the Genovese family to thrive amidst rivals, law enforcement pressures, and internal ambition. Michele's quiet mastery of alliances and rivalries ensured the family's longevity, preserving its influence and stability through one of the most dynamic and challenging periods in its history. As the 1960s progressed, Michele Miranda's role as the Quiet Consigliere of the Genovese family became increasingly multifaceted and critical. By the latter part of the decade, the family had grown into a highly sophisticated organization with diverse operations ranging from gambling and loan sharking to labor racketeering and legitimate business ventures. Michele's responsibilities extended far beyond mere advisory duties. He was now deeply involved in overseeing strategic operations, managing crises, and ensuring that the family's influence continued to expand while avoiding the pitfalls that had ensnared other criminal organizations. One of the defining aspects of Michele Miranda's leadership in the late 1960s was his control over financial and operational oversight. The family's operations were complex and required careful coordination to remain profitable and secure. Michele monitored these activities with meticulous attention, ensuring that every revenue stream, from underground gambling rings to union-related enterprises, functioned smoothly. His presence was subtle but omnipresent, guiding decisions, troubleshooting conflict, and maintaining the delicate balance between profitability and discretion. Labor racketeering remained one of the family's most lucrative operations, and Michele's influence was critical in maintaining control. He negotiated quietly with union leaders, business owners, and intermediaries to ensure that the family's interests were protected. These negotiations often required a combination of diplomacy, leverage, strategic pressure tasks that Michele executed with unparalleled skill. By managing these operations behind the scenes, he ensured that the family could extract maximum profit while minimizing exposure to legal and law enforcement risks. During this period, Michele also played a central role in coordinating the family's responses to internal and external crises. Rival families were constantly probing for weaknesses and ambition. Members within the Genovese family sometimes threatened stability. Michele's approach was always calculated. He assessed the potential consequences of any action, prioritized long-term stability over immediate gratification, and intervened when necessary to guide outcomes. His calm, rational approach prevented disputes from escalating into violence that could have endangered both the organization and its members. Michele's skill in diplomacy and alliance management continued to shape the family's interactions with other crime organizations by fostering relationships and maintaining lines of communication with key figures across New York and beyond. He created a network of trust and mutual benefit. These alliances were not static. They required constant attention, negotiation, and subtle maneuvering to remain effective. Michele's ability to maintain these connections while safeguarding the family's autonomy demonstrate his strategic intelligence and his deep understanding of power dynamics in the underworld. The late 1960s also presented heightened challenges from law enforcement. Federal and local authorities were increasingly sophisticated, employing surveillance, informants, and new investigative techniques to target organized crime. Michele's response to these pressures was rooted in foresight, caution, and operational discipline. He implemented protocols to protect sensitive information, ensured that communications were secure, and guided associates to act in ways that minimized risk. His understanding of legal exposure and his strategic planning were instrumental, allowing the family to continue operations largely unscathed despite intensified scrutiny. Michele Miranda's influence extended beyond operations into shaping the ethical and cultural framework of the family. While he was not a moralist in the traditional sense, he valued loyalty, discretion, and strategic thinking above all else. Members learned that impulsive actions, displays of ego, or unnecessary violence could undermine the family's stability. Michele's guidance created an environment where calculated decisions and long-term strategy were prioritized, shaping the organization's culture into one defined by discipline, foresight, and respect for hierarchy. Another critical element of Michele's work in the late 1960s was mentorship. He recognized that the family's longevity depended on the cultivation of competent and loyal leaders. Michele took a hands-on approach, advising promising members, teaching them the subtlety of negotiation, and instilling in them the principles of discretion and strategic thinking. Through this mentorship, he ensured that the family would have a new generation of capable leaders ready to continue its operations and uphold its values, even as the external environment grew more complex and challenging. Michele's crisis management extended to financial and operational disputes that might have otherwise destabilized the family. He was often called upon to mediate conflicts, both within the family and with external partners, using a combination of negotiation, subtle pressure, and strategic compromise. His interventions were rarely public or dramatic. They were quiet, calculated, and often invisible to outsiders. Yet their effects were profound, preserving the family's cohesion and ensuring that operations continued smoothly despite potential disruption. One of the most remarkable aspects of Michele Miranda's role during this period was his ability to operate simultaneously in multiple spheres of influence. He oversaw operations, managed internal conflicts, navigated alliances, and responded to law enforcement pressures, all while remaining largely invisible to the public. His effectiveness lay not in force or notoriety but in strategic intelligence, discretion, and the ability to anticipate outcomes several steps in advance. This combination of qualities allowed the Genovese family to maintain dominance and stability in a period of both opportunity and uncertainty. By the end of the 1960s, Michele Miranda had firmly established himself as a master of strategy, operations, and crisis management. His influence over the family's operations and his skill in navigating the complex web of alliances and rivalries ensured that the Genovese family remained a formidable force in New York organized crime. Michele's quiet, deliberate, and thoughtful approach had proven far more effective than aggression or visibility, demonstrating the enduring power of intelligence, patience, and foresight in a dangerous and unpredictable world. The legacy of Michele Miranda during the late 1960s is one of stability, strategic brilliance, and quiet authority. His guidance shaped the family's operations, strengthened its influence, and ensured its continued success. In a world where the actions of impulsive or violent figures often led to collapse, Michele's disciplined, thoughtful, and strategic approach set him apart. His ability to manage complex operations, navigate rivalries, and mitigate risks ensured that the family not only survived, but thrived during one of the most challenging periods in its history. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's role in this era, it becomes evident that his power was most effective precisely because it was invisible. He influenced outcomes, guided decisions, and preserved the organization's stability without seeking attention or recognition. Michele's quiet mastery of operations, strategy, and alliances demonstrate that in the intricate and dangerous world of organized crime, true leadership is defined not by spectacle or violence, but by intelligence, patience, and the careful exercise of influence. As the 1970s began, Michele Miranda's influence within the Genovese family remained profound and unwavering. By this point, he had become more than just a trusted consigliere. He was the family's strategic backbone, the guiding force whose decisions and advice shaped the organization's operations, alliances, and long-term planning. The early 1970s brought new challenges, changing criminal markets, emerging law enforcement tactics, and the inevitable question of succession within the family. Michele's experience, discretion, and strategic mind would prove critical in navigating the challenges while ensuring the continued stability and dominance of the Genovese organization. One of Michele Miranda's primary concerns during this period was succession planning. As older leaders aged and younger members sought advancement, tension inevitably arose over the distribution of power and influence. Michele understood that mismanaged succession could fracture the family, provoke internal conflict, and weaken its position against rivals. His approach was measured and pragmatic. He assessed the strengths, loyalties, and temperaments of potential successors and guided decisions that balanced ambition with the family's long-term stability. By acting as a stabilizing force, Michele ensured that leadership transitions were orderly, minimizing the risk of internal discord. The early 1970s also saw the family navigating increasingly sophisticated law enforcement pressures. Federal agencies, including the FBI and emerging organized crime task forces, were employing new investigative techniques, such as wiretaps, surveillance, and informants. Michele Miranda's response was rooted in preparation, discretion, and operational security. He reinforced the importance of confidentiality, guided associates on secure communication methods, and implemented strategies to shield the family from exposure. His foresight allowed the Genovese family to continue operations while minimizing legal risks and maintaining their power base. During this period, Michele also played a central role in managing the family's financial and criminal ventures. Gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering remained core sources of revenue, and Michele's oversight ensured that these operations were coordinated, efficient, and protected from internal and external threats. He monitored disputes, resolved conflicts quietly, and ensured that alliances within and outside the family were upheld. Michele's influence was pervasive yet subtle. His guidance shaped outcomes without the need for dramatic or violent displays. Michele's interactions with other major figures in organized crime remained crucial in this decade. The early 1970s were marked by shifting alliances, rivalries, and opportunities that required careful navigation. Michele's diplomatic skills, honed over decades, allowed him to maintain productive relationships with leaders of other families while safeguarding the interests of the Genovese organization. His ability to negotiate, mediate, and strategize ensured that the family could operate effectively within a broader network of criminal enterprises without unnecessary conflict. A defining feature of Michele Miranda's leadership during this time was his ability to manage internal disputes. Ambitious members, competing factions, and personal grievances had the potential to destabilize the family. Michele's approach combined careful listening, strategic assessment, and discreet intervention. By addressing conflicts before they escalated, he maintained cohesion and reinforced the principle that loyalty, discretion, and calculated action were the guiding values of the organization. His reputation for impartiality and strategic insight made him a figure whose guidance was sought and respected even in tense or high-stakes situations. In addition to succession and operational management, Michele also emphasized the importance of long-term strategy. He understood that the family's survival and influence depended not merely on immediate profit, but on the careful cultivation of opportunities, alliances, and a culture of loyalty. Michele's strategic thinking encompassed not only financial ventures but also personnel decisions, dispute resolution, and the management of risk. His ability to anticipate future challenges and opportunities allowed the Genovese family to remain adaptable and resilient in an environment marked by constant change. The early 1970s also presented opportunities for expansion into new ventures, both legitimate and illicit. Michele's cautious and strategic approach ensured that the family could capitalize on these opportunities without overextending or attracting undue attention. He evaluated potential risks and benefits, guided negotiations, and ensured that operations were coordinated and controlled. Michele's influence was particularly evident in projects requiring complex coordination or sensitive negotiation, where his experience and discretion provided a decisive advantage. Michele Miranda's mentorship of younger members continued to shape the organization's culture and future leadership. He instilled in promising associates the values that had guided his own career: patience, strategic thinking, discretion, and loyalty. By mentoring the next generation, Michele ensured that the family's traditions and operational principles were preserved, providing continuity and stability even as the criminal landscape evolved. His guidance helped cultivate a cadre of capable, trusted leaders who could sustain the organization's power and protect its interests for decades to come. The early 1970s also underscored Michele's ability to maintain the family's public invisibility. While law enforcement and media attention increased, He ensured that the family's most critical activities remained insulated from exposure. Michele's discreet handling of operations, alliances, and internal conflict demonstrated the effectiveness of quiet influence over public notoriety. His leadership illustrated that in the world of organized crime, stability and longevity often depend on subtle strategy, careful planning, and measured intervention rather than spectacle or force. By the mid-1970s, Michele Miranda's role as consigliere had solidified into one of enduring authority and influence. He had guided the family through succession planning, law enforcement pressure, operational management, and alliance building with remarkable skill. His ability to balance competing demands, navigate risk, and maintain stability ensured that the Genovese family remained a dominant force in New York organized crime. Michele's influence was pervasive, yet largely invisible, a testament to the power of strategic intelligence and quiet authority. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's contributions in the early 1970s, it becomes evident that his legacy was built on more than longevity. It was defined by the consistent application of wisdom, strategy, and discretion. His ability to anticipate challenges, resolve disputes, and guide decisions ensured the family's continued success and stability. Michele's quiet, thoughtful, and deliberate approach to leadership exemplifies how influence can be exercised effectively without reliance on violence, notoriety, or public attention. Michele Miranda's work in this era underscores the principle that true power is often invisible yet decisive. Through careful planning, mentorship, and strategic foresight, he maintained the cohesion, influence, and operational success of the Genovese family, navigating the complex pressures of succession, law enforcement scrutiny, and inter-family rivalries. His approach demonstrates that enduring leadership in organized crime requires not only intelligence and courage but also patience, discretion, and a profound understanding of human behavior. By the 1970s, Michele Miranda had become the embodiment of the quiet, steady force within the Genovese family. His reputation as a master strategist, discreet mediator, and trusted consigliere was firmly established. While others in the world of organized crime sought notoriety or relied on intimidation, Michele's influence was exercised subtly, behind closed doors, and with meticulous precision. This chapter examines how his high-level decision-making shaped the family's operations, navigated conflict, and ensured the continued dominance of the Genovese organization during a turbulent decade. One of the most critical aspects of Michele's role during this period was guiding the family through inter-family conflicts. The 1970s saw shifts in power dynamics among New York's 5 families, with rivalries threatening to escalate into violence that could attract law enforcement attention and disrupt profitable operations. Michele's approach was methodical. He assessed the intentions and capabilities of rival leaders, evaluated the potential consequences of confrontation, and developed strategies that maximized advantage while minimizing risk. Often, his interventions prevented disputes from erupting into open war, preserving the family's stability and resources. Michele's influence extended to high-stakes financial and operational decisions. The Genovese family was involved in a wide array of ventures, from gambling and loan sharking to union manipulation and legitimate business enterprises. Each operation required careful oversight, negotiation, and risk management. Michele's guidance ensured that the family's activities were coordinated, profitable, and insulated from exposure. By combining strategic vision with operational knowledge, he maintained control over complex systems that spanned multiple territories and industries, ensuring that the family's power and wealth continued to grow. A hallmark of Michele Miranda's leadership was his ability to balance the interests of different factions within the family. Ambition, jealousy, and personal grievances were constant challenges. In an organization as large and influential as the Genovese family, Michele acted as a mediator and strategist, resolving disputes before they could escalate, and ensuring that internal cohesion remained intact. His interventions were rarely public or dramatic. Rather, they were executed quietly, subtly, and effectively, reinforcing the principle that loyalty and stability were paramount to the family's success. During the 1970s, Michele also played a crucial role in shaping succession planning and long-term strategy. The aging leadership of the family required careful management to ensure that transitions did not provoke internal instability or weaken the organization's position relative to rival families. Michele's approach combined foresight, mentorship, and diplomacy. He evaluated the strengths and weaknesses of potential successors, guided decision-making, and implemented strategies to preserve both authority and loyalty. His efforts ensured that the family remained resilient and capable of adapting to changing circumstances. Law enforcement pressure intensified during this period as federal agencies increasingly targeted organized crime, with advanced investigative tools. Michele's strategic thinking proved invaluable in navigating these challenges. He implemented measures to protect sensitive operations, reinforced protocol for secure communication, and advised associates on minimizing exposure. His foresight and caution allowed the family to continue its activities largely unimpeded, demonstrating that effective leadership in organized crime often relies more on intelligence and preparation than on displays of force or aggression. Michele's approach to alliances with other crime families continued to be a cornerstone of his strategy. He understood that collaboration, negotiation, and mutual benefit were often more effective than confrontation. Through careful relationship building, Michele strengthened the family's position within the broader criminal ecosystem. He fostered trust and maintained open lines of communication, ensuring that agreements were honored and that cooperative ventures were executed efficiently. His subtle diplomacy mitigated risks of conflict and enhanced the family's influence across multiple spheres of operation. In addition to external alliances, Michele's mentorship of younger members remained a key element of his leadership. He recognized that the family's longevity depended on cultivating capable and loyal individuals who could carry forward his principles of discretion, strategy, and patience. Michele taught his protégés the intricacies of negotiation, conflict resolution, and strategic planning, ensuring that the next generation could maintain the family's stability and power. His influence extended beyond operations to the very culture and values of the organization. A defining characteristic of Michele Miranda's counsel during this era was his focus on timing. He understood that the success of any strategy often depended on when it was executed, whether mediating a conflict, initiating a financial venture, or responding to law enforcement pressures. Michele assessed not only the immediate situation but also the optimal moment for action. This precision allowed the family to act decisively while avoiding unnecessary risks, reinforcing the principle that patience and strategic timing are critical tools of effective leadership. Michele's quiet influence was evident in the outcomes of critical decisions during this period, whether preventing interfamily violence, guiding complex operations, or resolving internal disputes. His interventions were consistently effective. Associates recognized that Michele's counsel was rooted in experience, intelligence, and foresight. His reputation for sound judgment ensured that his advice was sought and followed, even in the most challenging or high-pressure situation. The results of his quiet authority were tangible. The Genovese family maintained cohesion, expanded its influence, and navigated a rapidly evolving criminal landscape with remarkable stability. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Michele Miranda's leadership in the 1970s was the contrast between his power and his visibility. While other figures in organized crime sought notoriety, Michele operated largely out of public view. His effectiveness was not measured by fear or recognition but by results. Operations ran smoothly, conflicts were resolved, alliances were maintained, and the family's influence remained unshaken. This invisible yet decisive power exemplified the unique role of a consigliere, guiding, advising, and shaping outcomes without the need for dramatic displays. As the decade progressed, Michele's legacy as the Quiet Consigliere became increasingly apparent. His strategic mind, discretion, and ability to navigate complex challenges ensured the family's continued success. By balancing operational oversight, high-level decision-making, and mentorship, he solidified his place as one of the most effective and respected figures in the history of organized crime. Michele Miranda demonstrated that true influence is often subtle, measured, and enduring, a lesson that would resonate long after the events of the 1970s. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's role during this period, it is clear that his leadership was defined by intelligence, patience, and a profound understanding of human behavior. He exemplified the principle that in organized crime, the most enduring power is often exercised quietly through strategic foresight, careful planning, and the ability to guide decisions without seeking recognition. Michele's contributions during the 1970s ensured not only the family's operational success but also its resilience and longevity in a world where impulsiveness and visibility often led to downfall. By the end of the 1970s, Michele Miranda had solidified his legacy as the indispensable consigliere of the Genovese family, a figure whose quiet authority shaped the organization, protected its interests, and guided it through one of the most dynamic and challenging periods in its history. His story is a testament to the power of discretion, intelligence, and strategic thinking in a world where violence and notoriety are often mistaken for true leadership. As the 1970s drew to a close, Michele Miranda's role as the Quiet Consigliere of the Genovese family became even more critical. By this time, federal investigations into organized crime had intensified, targeting the intricate web of operations that had allowed the family to prosper for decades. Law enforcement agencies were employing more sophisticated tools, wiretaps, surveillance, undercover informants, and extensive financial investigations to disrupt criminal enterprises. Michele's decades of experience, discretion, and strategic foresight made him indispensable in guiding the family through this new era of scrutiny. One of Michele Miranda's primary concerns during this period was protecting the family's leadership from federal attention. The FBI and other agencies were increasingly focused on the heads of family, making visible leaders vulnerable to indictments or prosecution. Michele's approach was subtle but effective. He advised on maintaining plausible deniability, shielding key figures from direct involvement in sensitive operations, and delegating responsibilities in a manner that reduced risk. His guidance ensured that the family could continue its activities while minimizing exposure and preserving the stability of its leadership. Internal restructuring became another crucial aspect of Michele's work. As the organization adapted to the changing environment, there was a need to streamline operations, redistribute responsibilities, and reinforce hierarchy. Michele played a central role in this process, identifying key personnel, ensuring loyalty, and aligning assignments with strategic priorities. His focus was not only on efficiency but also on maintaining the family's cohesion. By managing this restructuring with discretion, Michele minimized the risk of internal dissent and preserved the loyalty of members who were essential to the family's ongoing operation. The late 1970s also presented complex challenges in terms of interfamily relations. The five families of New York were constantly negotiating power, territory, and influence. Disputes and rivalries threatened to erupt into violence that could attract federal attention. Michele Miranda's diplomatic skills were critical in this period, as he mediated conflict, brokered agreements, and reinforced alliances that safeguarded the family's interests. His ability to operate quietly and influence outcomes without creating unnecessary tension was a testament to his mastery of strategic negotiation. Michele's guidance extended deeply into operational management during this era. Gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and other ventures continued to generate a substantial revenue, but they also carried heightened risk due to increased federal scrutiny. Michele implemented strategies to maintain profitability while reducing exposure. He advised on secure communication methods, coordinated covert transactions, and ensured that operations were compartmentalized to protect the organization. His strategic oversight allowed the family to continue functioning effectively in a climate of unprecedented legal pressure. Mentorship remained a central element of Michele Miranda's leadership. He recognized that the family's survival depended on the cultivation of competent, loyal, and discreet leaders who could navigate the complexities of the evolving criminal landscape. Michele personally guided rising figures within the organization, imparting lessons on negotiation, discretion, and strategic thinking. This mentorship ensured that the principles he had applied throughout his career, patience, foresight, and loyalty, would continue to shape the family's operations and culture for years to come. A critical component of Michele's strategy during this period was managing internal dissent. Ambition, jealousy, and personal grievances could easily destabilize an organization under pressure. Michele approached these challenges with careful assessment and quiet intervention. By resolving disputes discreetly, redirecting ambitions toward productive outcomes, and reinforcing the importance of loyalty and strategic thinking, he maintained internal cohesion and prevented fractures that could weaken the family. His interventions were subtle, yet the impact was profound, preserving the organization's unity during a time of external and internal challenges. Michele also continued to refine the family's approach to alliances and negotiations with other criminal organizations. By fostering trust, facilitating collaboration, and managing delicate relationships, he ensured that the Genovese family maintained a position of influence and avoided unnecessary conflicts. Michele understood that alliances were not static and required constant attention to navigate changing circumstances. His foresight and diplomacy allowed the family to capitalize on opportunity while avoiding pitfalls that could attract legal or violent repercussions. During the early 1980s, the federal government began to develop more aggressive legal strategies targeting organized crime, including the use of racketeering and conspiracy laws. Michele's strategic acumen was critical in preparing the family for this new legal environment. He emphasized operational secrecy, cautious delegation, and risk mitigation, guiding the organization to adapt without compromising its core operation. Michele's understanding of law enforcement tactics and his ability to anticipate their next move gave the family a significant advantage in navigating this increasingly hostile environment. Michele Miranda's reputation for discretion, wisdom, and strategic foresight became even more pronounced during this era. while others in the underworld sought attention or relied on displays of power. Michele operated quietly, shaping decisions and outcomes without drawing notice. Associates and rivals alike recognized that his counsel carried extraordinary weight. His influence was exercised not through fear or force but through intellect, experience, and the consistent application of sound judgment. The combination of federal pressure, internal restructuring, and evolving criminal markets required a leader who could balance multiple priorities simultaneously. Michele's unique blend of strategic vision, operational oversight, and interpersonal intelligence allowed him to meet these demands effectively. By guiding high-level decisions, managing crises, and ensuring the loyalty and competence of key personnel, he preserved the family's strength and continuity. Michele's quiet authority became an essential stabilizing force in a period of uncertainty and change. As the early 1980s progressed, Michele Miranda's legacy was increasingly evident. The family remained cohesive, operationally successful, and influential, despite the intensifying pressures of law enforcement and internal transition. Michele's role in shaping strategy, guiding leadership, and navigating complex relationships demonstrated that effective power in organized crime is often exercised quietly, through foresight, discretion, and intelligence. His influence ensured that the Genovese family could continue to thrive in an era marked by unprecedented challenges. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's work during this period, it is clear that his contributions were foundational to the family's resilience. By combining strategic foresight, operational oversight, mentorship, and discreet conflict resolution, he reinforced the principles that had guided his career for decades. Michele's quiet, calculated approach exemplified the enduring power of intelligence, discretion, and patience in a world often defined by impulsive action and violence. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's leadership during the late 1970s and early 1980s highlights the critical role of the consigliere as both strategist and stabilizer. His ability to navigate federal scrutiny, guide internal restructuring, and maintain operational success ensured that the family remained strong, cohesive, and influential. Michele's legacy is defined not by notoriety or public attention, but by the enduring stability, strategic excellence, and loyalty he cultivated within the Genovese family, a testament to the power of quiet, thoughtful leadership in the shadows of organized crime. The 1980s marked a particularly challenging period for Michele Miranda and the Genovese family. By this time, law enforcement agencies had intensified their efforts to dismantle organized crime, utilizing new legal tools and investigative techniques, including wiretaps, surveillance, and the expanding use of the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as RICO. These developments posed unprecedented challenges to established operations and tested the wisdom and strategic acumen of seasoned figures like Michele. As the quiet consigliere, his ability to guide the family through these turbulent times became indispensable. Michele's foremost concern in the early 1980s was shielding the family from federal scrutiny while maintaining its profitability and influence. He advised the leadership on minimizing exposure by delegating high-risk tasks to trusted associates and ensuring that operations were insulated from direct involvement by senior members. Michele understood that visibility often led to vulnerability, and he meticulously orchestrated systems that allowed the family to function effectively without drawing unnecessary attention. His foresight and caution became a stabilizing force at a time when legal pressure threatened to destabilize even the most organized criminal enterprises. In addition to federal threats, Michele faced internal challenges. The family's aging leadership created questions about succession, as well as potential rivalries among ambitious underlings seeking to consolidate power. Michele approached these issues with careful diplomacy and strategic foresight. He assessed the loyalties, temperaments, and capabilities of potential successors, guiding decisions that maintain balance and cohesion within the organization. By quietly managing ambitions and redistributing responsibilities, Michele ensured that internal conflict was minimized, preserving both stability and the family's operational efficiency. Michele Miranda's involvement in high-level decision-making during this decade extended to both financial operations and day-to-day criminal ventures. Gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and legitimate business interests all required oversight and coordination. Michele ensured that disputes were resolved discreetly, agreements with outside partners were maintained, and operations ran efficiently. His influence was subtle yet profound, ensuring the continued prosperity of the family while avoiding actions that could provoke federal attention or interfamily conflict. The RICO Act, passed in the early 1980s, posed a particularly complex challenge for Michele. Its provisions allowed federal authorities to prosecute leaders of criminal organizations for crimes committed by subordinates, increasing the legal risk for senior figures. Michele's response was both strategic and preventative. He implemented measures to separate decision-making from direct involvement in criminal acts, emphasized operational compartmentalization, and reinforced loyalty among trusted members. This approach allowed the family to continue its activities while mitigating the risk of indictments against senior leadership. Michele's ability to anticipate legal threats and adapt organizational strategies accordingly highlighted his skill as a master strategist and protector of the family. During this period, Michele also continued to mentor and shape the next generation of the family. Recognizing the importance of continuity and disciplined leadership, he guided younger members in negotiation, strategic thinking, and conflict resolution. He emphasized the values that had defined his career: discretion, patience, loyalty, and foresight. Michele's mentorship ensured that the family would maintain a cadre of capable leaders who could navigate both internal challenges and external pressures with intelligence and prudence. Alliances with other families and criminal networks remained a central element of Michele's strategy in the 1980s. By maintaining communication, negotiating disputes, and fostering trust, he ensured that the Genovese family retained influence and avoided unnecessary conflicts. Michele understood that alliances were delicate and required constant attention. His diplomacy, foresight, and subtle management of relationships allowed the family to capitalize on opportunities, defend its territory, and maintain stability in a volatile underworld. Michele's quiet command was also evident in crisis management. Conflicts, both internal and external, threatened to destabilize operations. Michele approached these challenges with calm assessment, careful intervention, and strategic guidance. Whether resolving disputes between ambitious members, negotiating with rival families, or mitigating threats from law enforcement, his interventions were precise, discreet, and effective. This ability to manage crises without public spectacle reinforced his reputation as a rational and indispensable advisor. Despite the intensifying pressures of the 1980s, Michele maintained the principle that had guided his career: discretion, patience, loyalty, and strategic thinking. His leadership style contrasted sharply with more flamboyant or violent figures in organized crime, emphasizing invisible influence over visible power. Michele's reputation for intelligence and reliability ensured that his guidance was sought and followed by both older leaders and emerging members of the family. His approach demonstrated that true authority in organized crime is often exercised quietly but decisively. Michele Miranda's influence in the 1980s also reflected his deep understanding of human behavior and organizational dynamics. He recognized that loyalty could be cultivated through trust, fairness, and strategic reward, while dissent could be managed through careful negotiation and subtle intervention. By applying these insights, he preserved cohesion, prevented internal fractures, and guided the family through a decade marked by unprecedented legal, operational, and social challenges. By the mid-1980s, Michele's role had evolved into one of overarching strategic oversight. He monitored operations, managed internal and external relations, and provide counsel on critical decisions that would shape the family's future. His quiet but decisive influence ensured that the family remained dominant, cohesive, and profitable despite the growing intensity of federal investigations and the internal complexities of succession and loyalty. Michele's presence, though largely invisible, was a constant stabilizing force within the organization. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's contributions in the 1980s, it becomes clear that his legacy was defined not by violence or public notoriety, but by strategic foresight, discretion, and intellectual mastery. His ability to guide high-level decisions, protect leadership, manage operations, and mentor the next generation ensured the family's continued success in a period of unprecedented challenge. Michele's story exemplifies how enduring influence is often exercised quietly through wisdom and strategy rather than spectacle, and how a single, discreet figure can shape the destiny of a powerful organization. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's role during the 1980s underscored the enduring power of the consigliere in organized crime. By balancing law enforcement pressures, internal restructuring, succession planning, and operational oversight, he preserved the Genovese family's strength and stability. Michele's quiet, strategic leadership ensured that the family could navigate an era of intense scrutiny and change, demonstrating the profound impact that intelligence, patience, and discretion can have in the shadows of organized crime. By the mid-1980s, Michele Miranda had solidified his reputation as the unshakable, quiet force within the Genovese family. This period brought new challenges that tested the depth of his strategic and leadership abilities. Federal law enforcement had intensified its efforts to dismantle organized crime using informants, undercover operations, while internal threats from ambitious members and potential traitors loomed. Michele's role as consigliere had never been more critical. He was the family's strategist, mediator, and stabilizing presence in an era fraught with both legal and interpersonal dangers. One of the most pressing concerns during this period was the increasing prevalence of informants. Law enforcement agencies had developed more sophisticated techniques to infiltrate criminal organizations, and the threat of betrayal by members or associates became a constant worry. Michele understood that even a single compromised individual could expose critical operations and jeopardize the family's leadership. He approached this challenge with meticulous assessment, identifying potential risks, monitoring behavioral patterns, and implementing measures to minimize exposure. His proactive vigilance ensured that the family's most sensitive operations remained insulated and secure. Michele Miranda's strategy for managing internal threats emphasized discretion and subtlety. Ambitious underlings or disgruntled members could destabilize the family if left unchecked, but Michele recognized that public displays of force often created more problems than they solved. Instead, he used observation, counsel, and quiet intervention to neutralize threats. By guiding decisions carefully, advising leadership on the most strategic course of action, and sometimes reassigning responsibilities to maintain loyalty, Michele preserved cohesion without resorting to unnecessary violence. The mid-1980s also required Michele to address operational vulnerabilities. As law enforcement pressure increased, the risk associated with core ventures, such as gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering grew significantly. Michele's strategic insight allowed the family to adapt by compartmentalizing operations, employing trusted lieutenants for sensitive tasks, and maintaining strict secrecy in communications and transactions. These measures ensured that the family could continue to generate revenue while protecting its leadership and minimizing the risk of federal indictments. Another critical element of Michele's influence during this period was conflict resolution. Internal disputes, whether arising from disagreements over territory, money, or promotions, had the potential to escalate and threaten family stability. Michele's approach combined impartial assessment with careful negotiation. He listened attentively to all parties, evaluated the consequences of potential action, and implemented solutions that preserved loyalty and minimized friction. His calm, rational, and strategic interventions allowed disputes to be resolved before they evolved into violence or drawn-out feuds. Mentorship remained central to Michele Miranda's leadership. In the mid-1980s, he understood that the family's future depended on cultivating disciplined, loyal, and competent leaders. Michele personally guided rising members, teaching them the principles of discretion, patience, and strategic thinking that had defined his own career. By instilling these values, he ensured that the next generation would be equipped to maintain cohesion, navigate risks, and uphold the operational and cultural standards of the Genovese family. Michele's diplomatic skills were also crucial in managing the family's external relationships. Alliances with other families and criminal networks required ongoing maintenance, negotiation, and trust building. Michele's subtle influence allowed the family to maintain these connections while avoiding unnecessary conflict. He anticipated potential points of tension, mediated disputes before they escalated, and ensured that cooperative ventures were executed effectively. His quiet diplomacy reinforced the family's reputation as a stable and respected organization in the underworld. During this period, Michele Miranda also had to adapt to evolving law enforcement strategies. Federal authorities increasingly relied on electronic surveillance, undercover operative, and advanced forensic techniques to build cases against organized crime. Michele responded by emphasizing operational security, compartmentalization, and risk management. He guided associates on secure communication, monitored vulnerabilities in ongoing operations, and ensured that sensitive information remained tightly controlled. His strategic foresight allowed the family to navigate these pressures with minimal disruption to their core activities. Michele's influence extended beyond operational oversight and crisis management. He shaped the family's culture and values. Loyalty, discretion, and strategic thinking were constantly reinforced as guiding principles. Members understood that impulsive actions, displays of ego, or violations of trust could undermine not only individual standing but also the family's cohesion. Michele's example and guidance cultivated a disciplined environment where decisions were carefully considered and long-term outcomes prioritized over immediate gains. In addition to managing threats and guiding operations, Michele continued to play a pivotal role in high-level decision-making. From resource allocation and operational strategy to personnel management and risk mitigation, his advice was instrumental in shaping the family's actions. Michele's ability to synthesize complex information, anticipate outcomes, and provide measured recommendations solidified his position as the family's most trusted advisor. Associates, both senior and junior, relied on his judgment when navigating critical challenges. By the mid-1980s, Michele Miranda's quiet mastery of strategy, diplomacy, and operational oversight had become essential to the Genovese family's survival and continued success. His ability to manage internal threats, mitigate legal risks, preserve alliances, and mentor emerging leaders ensured that the organization remained cohesive, disciplined, and influential. Michele's effectiveness was rarely visible to outsiders, yet the impact of his guidance was profound, allowing the family to navigate one of the most turbulent periods in its history. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's role during this era, it becomes evident that his leadership was defined by intelligence, patience, and discretion. He exercised influence not through spectacle or fear, but through foresight, strategy, and the careful management of people and operation. His ability to maintain cohesion, navigate internal and external threats, and protect the family's long-term interest exemplifies the power of quiet authority in a world often dominated by impulsive action, public notoriety. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's work in the mid-1980s underscores the essential qualities of an effective consigliere: strategic vision, operational mastery, conflict resolution, mentorship, and discretion. By preserving cohesion in the face of informants, legal pressure, and internal ambition, he ensured that the Genovese family remained a dominant and resilient force. Michele's quiet guidance, unwavering judgment, and disciplined leadership set him apart as one of the most effective and respected figures in organized crime history, a testament to the enduring power of intelligence and strategy in the shadows of influence. By the late 1980s, Michele Miranda had become the embodiment of calm, strategic leadership within the Genovese family. After decades of guiding the organization through conflicts, operational expansion, and law enforcement pressures, he now faced a new and formidable challenge: the RICO prosecutions that threatened the very foundation of the family's power. Federal authorities were targeting organized crime leaders with unprecedented vigor, employing sophisticated legal strategies to dismantle operations and imprison those who had once seemed untouchable. Michele's role as the quiet consigliere became more crucial than ever, as his wisdom, discretion, and foresight guided the family through a period of heightened risk and uncertainty. Michele's first priority during this era was safeguarding the leadership. RICO laws made it possible for prosecutors to hold senior figures accountable for crimes committed by subordinates, increasing the vulnerability of key members. Michele understood the necessity of shielding decision-makers from direct involvement in criminal acts. He meticulously coordinated responsibilities, ensured that sensitive operations were carried out by trusted associates, and reinforced the principle of plausible deniability. Through careful planning and delegation, Michele reduced the exposure of senior figures while maintaining operational continuity. Internal management also became a central concern. The increasing pressure from law enforcement created potential instability as members became anxious, ambitious, or even susceptible to cooperation with authorities. Michele's approach to internal threats was subtle but decisive. He monitored behavior, assessed loyalty, and intervened discreetly when tensions arose, whether redistributing responsibilities, counseling members, or negotiating solutions to potential disputes. Michele maintained cohesion without public confrontation. His calm, rational demeanor reinforced trust and discipline within the organization. The late 1980s also required Michele to reassess and restructure certain operations. The changing legal environment meant that older methods of conducting business were riskier than ever. Gambling networks, loan sharking enterprises, and labor rackets needed tighter oversight, compartmentalization, and secrecy. Michele implemented strategies that reduced exposure, insulated critical leaders, and ensured that day-to-day operations could continue with minimal disruption. His strategic adjustments allowed the family to adapt effectively to a world in which law enforcement scrutiny had reached unprecedented levels. Michele's diplomacy with other criminal organizations remained an essential component of his leadership. Rivalries among New York's 5 families could erupt into violence, which would inevitably attract law enforcement attention. Michele's subtle negotiation skills allowed him to mediate disputes, forge agreements, and maintain alliances that reinforced the family's influence. By managing these relationships quietly but effectively, he minimized the risk of unnecessary conflict and positioned the family to benefit from cooperation with allies while preserving autonomy and power. Mentorship of younger members continued to be a key priority for Michele Miranda during this period. He understood that the family's survival depended on cultivating a next generation of leaders who could operate intelligently under pressure. Michele provided guidance in strategic thinking, negotiation, operational oversight, and risk management. He emphasized the values of discretion, loyalty, and patience, ensuring that emerging leaders were equipped to navigate the increasingly dangerous environment created by federal investigations and internal complexities. Michele's crisis management during RICO investigations exemplified his unparalleled strategic foresight. Whenever an operation was at risk, or an associate faced legal jeopardy, Michele assessed potential outcomes and recommended actions that balanced legal safety with operational continuity. His calm and reasoned interventions often prevented panic or rash decisions among members. This measured approach preserved both the family's stability and its profitability, demonstrating the value of quiet, informed leadership in times of extreme pressure. Operational security was another focus of Michele's guidance. The late 1980s marked a period when law enforcement was increasingly adept at infiltration and intelligence gathering. Michele emphasized the importance of secure communication, limited access to sensitive information, and compartmentalized operation. By ensuring that knowledge and responsibilities were carefully distributed, he reduced the risk that one compromised individual could expose the entire organization. Michele's meticulous approach reflected a lifetime of experience navigating legal threats and criminal enterprise simultaneously. Beyond managing threats and operations, Michele continued to influence the family's culture. His insistence on discipline, loyalty, and strategic thinking reinforced the values that had preserved the family for decades. Members understood that rash actions, impulsivity, or breaches of trust could have severe consequences. Michele's example and guidance cultivated a professional environment where decisions were deliberate, outcomes were carefully assessed, and long-term stability was prioritized over immediate gains. Michele's leadership in the late 1980s was also defined by his ability to anticipate future challenges. He recognized that the family's survival required careful planning beyond immediate crises, including succession management, the cultivation of trustworthy leadership, and strategic alliances. By preparing the organization for both internal and external threats, Michele ensured that the Genovese family remained resilient and capable of adapting to a rapidly evolving criminal and legal landscape. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Michele Miranda's role during this period was his ability to remain effective while remaining largely invisible. Unlike other high-profile figures in organized crime, Michele exerted influence quietly. He did not rely on intimidation, spectacle, or violence to maintain authority. Instead, his intelligence, discretion, and strategic acumen allowed him to shape the family's operations, decisions, and culture from behind the scenes. His power was subtle but decisive, proving that quiet leadership can be more effective and enduring than public notoriety. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's impact in the late 1980s, it is clear that his contributions were foundational to the family's survival and continued influence. His strategic management of operations, mentorship of future leaders, preservation of internal cohesion, and protection from federal scrutiny ensured that the family remained a dominant force, despite unprecedented legal pressure. Michele's legacy demonstrates that in the shadows of organized crime, true power is often exercised not through visibility but through intelligence, foresight, and discretion. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's leadership during the late 1980s solidified his reputation as the indispensable consigliere of the Genovese family. By navigating RICO prosecutions, managing internal and external threats, and guiding operations with strategic precision, he preserved both the family's stability and its long-term viability. Michele's quiet authority, meticulous planning, and unwavering judgment exemplify the enduring impact of a strategic, discreet leadership in one of the most challenging eras in the history of organized crime. As the 1980s drew to a close and the 1990s approached, Michele Miranda's presence within the Genovese family remained vital. Though the world around him was changing rapidly, the legal landscape had grown increasingly hostile, with federal authority employing aggressive tactics to dismantle organized crime networks. High-profile prosecutions, indictments, and convictions of prominent figures within the underworld were becoming commonplace. Amid this pressure, Michele's decades of experience, discretion, and strategic insight allowed him to continue guiding the family, preserving its cohesion, and maintaining its influence. His final years as consigliere were marked not by flamboyance, but by careful, calculated leadership that ensured the family's stability and operational resilience. Michele's focus during this period was multifaceted. Foremost was the management of succession and leadership continuity. The family required careful planning to ensure that as senior figures aged or faced legal challenges, authority could be transferred smoothly without triggering internal conflict or weakening the organization's power. Michele's strategic assessment of potential successors, combined with his guidance in cultivating loyalty and competence among emerging leaders, ensured that the family remained stable even as the old guard began to retire or step back. His ability to balance ambition, loyalty, and talent within the organization was crucial in maintaining operational continuity. Another significant aspect of Michele's work was safeguarding the family from federal scrutiny. RICO prosecutions continued to dominate law enforcement efforts, and the threat of informants or undercover operatives remained ever present. Michele's approach relied on discretion, compartmentalization of operations, and delegation to trusted lieutenants. He emphasized the importance of secure communication and adherence to protocol, designed to protect both leadership and sensitive operation. By reducing exposure and insulating senior members, Michele allowed the family to operate effectively despite the intensifying legal environment. Michele also continued to oversee and refine the family's core operations. Gambling networks, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and other revenue-generating activity required careful management to remain profitable while minimizing legal risk. Michele's strategic oversight ensured that operations were coordinated, disputes were resolved discreetly, and alliances with outside partners were maintained. His experience allowed him to anticipate challenges, mitigate risk, and ensure that the family's income streams continued uninterrupted during a time of heightened federal pressure. During these final years, Michele's role as a mediator and stabilizer became even more pronounced. Internal disputes, ambitions, and rivalries had the potential to fracture the family under stress. Michele's calm, rational, and discreet interventions prevented such fractures. He assessed conflicts, guided negotiations, and implemented solutions that preserved both loyalty and operational efficiency. His quiet influence reinforced the family's culture of discipline and strategic thinking, ensuring that members understood the importance of measured action and foresight over impulsive behavior. Mentorship remained a cornerstone of Michele's legacy. He continued to advise and shape emerging leaders within the family, instilling in them the principle that had defined his own career: discretion, patience, strategic foresight, and loyalty. By preparing the next generation of decision-makers, Michele ensured that the family would not only survive but thrive, even as external pressures increased and older leaders stepped back. His guidance reinforced the family's operational and cultural continuity, solidifying the foundation for future leadership. Michele's diplomacy extended to interactions with other crime families and criminal networks. Maintaining alliances and managing rivalries required subtlety, tact, and foresight. Michele's interventions prevented unnecessary conflicts and promoted cooperation where beneficial. His influence ensured that the Genovese family retained its dominant position in the underworld, not through intimidation or public showmanship, but through careful negotiation, strategic foresight, and the quiet exercise of authority. Crisis management during these years also highlighted Michele's skill. Whenever the family faced legal investigations, internal disputes, or operational threats, Michele assessed risks and advised on the most prudent course of action. His interventions were strategic and discreet, preventing panic, miscalculation, or impulsive actions that could have endangered the organization. Michele's ability to maintain composure and clarity in high-pressure situations reinforced his indispensable role as the family's consigliere. The late 1980s and early 1990s also showcased Michele Miranda's focus on operational security. With law enforcement increasingly sophisticated in surveillance and infiltration, Michele emphasized strict protocols, compartmentalization of sensitive operations, and limiting the flow of information. Associates were carefully vetted, responsibilities were clearly defined, and high-risk tasks were delegated to trusted lieutenants. This meticulous attention to detail protected the family from exposure and ensured that its most critical activities remained insulated from federal scrutiny. Michele's influence extended to shaping the long-term vision of the organization. Beyond immediate survival and operational management, he considered the family's legacy and resilience. He encouraged strategic investments, nurtured trusted relationships, and reinforced cultural values that prioritized loyalty, discretion, and rational decision-making. Michele's forward-thinking approach ensured that the Genovese family would not merely react to threats but could adapt, evolve, and thrive in a constantly changing environment. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Michele Miranda's final years was the contrast between his quiet demeanor and the profound impact of his guidance. Unlike many in the underworld who sought notoriety or relied on fear, Michele wielded power through intelligence, strategy, and subtle influence. He shaped outcomes, preserved the family structure, and mentored leaders without seeking attention or recognition. His approach exemplified the principle that in organized crime, as in life, the most enduring power often resides in those who act wisely, quietly, and consistently over time. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's legacy during these years, it becomes clear that his contributions were foundational to the Genovese family's survival and success. By guiding succession, protecting leadership, overseeing operations, managing crises, and mentoring future leaders, he ensured that the family remained cohesive, resilient, and influential despite unprecedented legal and operational challenges. Michele's life demonstrates that true authority is exercised through foresight, judgment, and strategic discretion, rather than public spectacle or force. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's final years as consigliere underscore the enduring value of intelligence, patience, and quiet leadership. Even as the underworld changed dramatically under federal pressure and internal dynamics shifted, Michele remained the stabilizing force, guiding the Genovese family with a steady hand. His legacy is a testament to the power of thoughtful, strategic influence, a model of leadership that shaped one of the most formidable organized crime organizations in American history, leaving an indelible mark on both the family and the wider underworld. As the 1990s progressed, Michele Miranda's active involvement in the Genovese family naturally began to decline. Age, health, and decades of intense service in the underworld led him to step back from day-to-day operations. Yet his influence remained both subtle and profound. While the operational leadership increasingly fell to a new generation of figures, Michele continued to serve as an advisor, mentor, and stabilizing presence. His wisdom and experience, honed over decades of navigating the dangerous and complex world of organized crime, ensured that even in semi-retirement, he remained a critical figure within the family. During this period, Michele focused largely on mentorship and strategic counsel. The new generation of leaders, although capable, faced challenges that were both familiar and unprecedented. Federal investigations were increasingly sophisticated, interfamily rivalries persisted, and internal pressures for control and authority never ceased. Michele's advice was sought regularly, not only for immediate problem solving but also for long-term planning. His guidance emphasized discretion, patience, and rational assessment of both risk and opportunity, reinforcing the principles that had guided the family through decades of volatility. Michele's declining activity did not equate to irrelevance. On the contrary, his experience rendered his counsel invaluable. He was consulted on complex decisions involving succession, alliances, and responses to federal legal strategies. The Genovese family had by this point endured multiple waves of RICO prosecutions and law enforcement campaigns, and Michele's insight into both the operational and psychological aspects of these threats provided a stabilizing influence. His advice often shaped decisions behind the scenes, ensuring continuity and cohesion without requiring him to take an overt or public role. Even as Michele's hands-on management lessened, he remained attentive to internal cohesion. The potential for ambition-fueled conflicts or fractures among newer members of the family was a constant concern. Michele's approach was consistent with his lifelong philosophy: subtle intervention, measured guidance, and strategic redistribution of responsibilities. He observed interactions carefully, offered counsel discreetly, and ensured that loyalty and trust were reinforced. His presence, even in a less active capacity, reassured members that the family's structure remained intact and its values maintained. The 1990s also saw Michele Miranda navigating the delicate task of balancing tradition and adaptation. The criminal underworld was evolving, with changes in law enforcement, technology, and business opportunities altering the landscape. Michele advised the family on maintaining core operational principles while adapting to new circumstances. He encouraged leaders to retain the culture of discretion, patience, and strategic foresight, while integrating more modern approaches to operational management and risk mitigation. His ability to blend traditional wisdom with contemporary strategy ensured that the family remained resilient and relevant. A significant part of Michele's influence during this period was his quiet but firm reinforcement of family culture. Values such as loyalty, trust, strategic thinking, and disciplined decision-making were constantly emphasized. He reminded both older and younger members that impulsive behavior, ego-driven conflicts, or recklessness could jeopardize not only individual standing but the organization as a whole. Michele's guidance created an environment in which deliberate, thoughtful action was prioritized, and where members understood that the family's stability and continuity were the highest priorities. Michele also continued to provide advice on external relations. Alliances with other families and criminal networks required ongoing attention to prevent conflicts and preserve cooperative ventures. Michele's diplomacy, refined over decades, allowed him to advise on subtle negotiations, conflict resolution, and long-term relationship management. His insight into human behavior, motivations, and the balance of power made him an essential source of counsel for decisions that could affect the family's influence and reputation within the wider criminal landscape. Throughout the 1990s, Michele Miranda's reputation as a quiet, effective strategist was unquestioned. His authority did not rely on intimidation, force, or public recognition. It relied on consistent, rational, and effective decision-making over decades. Younger members respected his wisdom Older leaders trusted his judgment, and even external allies understood the subtle yet formidable influence he wielded. Michele's style exemplified the principle that enduring power is often exercised through intelligence, discretion, and the ability to guide others toward prudent decisions. Michele's declining physical involvement also allowed him to focus more on reflection and mentorship. He shared stories of past challenges, the importance of strategic patience, and the lessons learned from navigating decades of both operational success and near misses with law enforcement. These reflections not only educated the next generation but reinforced a culture of learning, observation, and disciplined planning within the family. Michele ensured that the family's institutional knowledge was preserved and that the next leaders would carry forward the values that had ensured the family's survival and dominance for decades. Despite stepping back from daily operations, Michele Miranda's strategic influence persisted through his ability to shape high-level decisions. From assessing potential risks to advising on alliances and succession, his counsel continued to guide the family's actions. Even as new leaders took on the responsibilities he once managed directly, Michele's experience provided a framework for rational, measured decision-making. The family's enduring stability, in an era of changing pressures, was a testament to the enduring value of his quiet guidance. Michele's later years underscore a vital principle of leadership in organized crime. Influence is not always proportional to visibility. His impact was felt not through public displays of power, but through careful observation, subtle intervention, and the cultivation of loyalty and competence within the organization. By guiding decisions, shaping culture, and mentoring emerging leaders, Michele ensured that the Genovese family remained a cohesive, resilient, and influential force, even as he gradually withdrew from hands-on management. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's later years highlight the enduring nature of his contributions. By stepping back without abandoning influence, he preserved the family's stability, reinforced its culture, and prepared the next generation to navigate an increasingly complex criminal landscape. Michele's story demonstrates that true leadership, especially in a world defined by discretion and risk, is measured not by public attention but by the sustained effectiveness and resilience of the organization under one's guidance. Michele Miranda's quiet, strategic presence during the 1990s ensured that the Genovese family remained a dominant and disciplined organization, capable of adapting to changing times while preserving the values and traditions that had defined its success. His legacy as a mentor, strategist, and stabilizing force is a testament to the power of thoughtful, discreet leadership, a model of influence that endured long after his most active years. As the 1990s progressed into its final years, Michele Miranda's presence within the Genovese family was increasingly defined by wisdom, reflection, and the lasting influence of decades of quiet leadership. While he had gradually withdrawn from day-to-day operational responsibility, his role as mentor, advisor, and guiding force remained critical. By this time, the family had successfully navigated multiple waves of federal prosecution, internal disputes, and the natural evolution of leadership across generations. Michele's strategic foresight and discreet guidance had shaped the family into an organization capable of enduring change while preserving its core principles. Michele's primary focus during these years was ensuring continuity. Leadership transitions, succession planning, and the development of capable, loyal leaders were central to the family's stability. Michele assessed the strengths, weaknesses, and temperaments emerging figures, advising on which individuals were best suited to assume operational or strategic responsibilities. He emphasized that the longevity of the family depended on maintaining a balance between ambition and loyalty, innovation and tradition. By guiding these decisions quietly, Michele prevented potential internal conflict and reinforced the hierarchy and discipline necessary for survival. Federal law enforcement pressures continued to evolve in the late 1990s. Sophisticated surveillance, undercover operations, and aggressive prosecutions remained constant threats to the family. Michele's advice focused on mitigating exposure, ensuring operational security, and maintaining the insulation of senior leadership from high-risk activities. While he was no longer directly involved in executing operations, his decades of experience enabled him to identify vulnerabilities, anticipate threats, and offer guidance that allowed the family to remain both active and protected. His ability to foresee challenges and craft strategic solutions solidified his status as an indispensable advisor. Mentorship remained a defining aspect of Michele Miranda's influence during his final years. He worked closely with the younger generation of leaders, imparting lessons learned from decades of managing conflicts, guiding operations, and navigating law enforcement pressures. Michele emphasized patience, discretion, and the importance of strategic thinking over impulsive action. By instilling these values, he ensured that the family's culture and operational philosophy would endure beyond his own active participation, creating a lasting institutional legacy. Internal cohesion continued to be a priority. Even in an era marked by declining direct involvement, Michele monitored relationship, mediated disputes, and advised on decisions that could affect loyalty or morale. Ambition, jealousy, or misunderstandings had the potential to fracture the organization if left unchecked. Michele's interventions were subtle but effective. He guided leaders on conflict resolution, recommended strategic reallocations of responsibility, and reinforced the principles of trust and loyalty. His calm, reasoned approach preserved the family's stability and ensured that internal divisions did not undermine its operation. Michele also continued to influence external relationships, alliances with other families, cooperative ventures, and negotiations to prevent conflict remained critical for maintaining the Genovese family's power and influence. Michele's guidance in these matters was based on a deep understanding of human behavior, negotiation tactics, and the dynamics of power within the criminal underworld. His advice allowed the family to maintain favorable relationships without resorting to unnecessary confrontation or risk. His quiet diplomacy ensured that the family's interests were protected, and its reputation remained strong. In addition to operational and strategic guidance, Michele focused on the preservation of knowledge. He shared insights on organizational management, crisis mitigation, and decision-making processes that had ensured the family's success over decades. By codifying lessons learned and passing them to emerging leaders, Michele created a framework for sustained strategic thinking. His ability to blend practical advice with philosophical guidance ensured that future generations understood the principles behind decisions, rather than merely following instructions. Despite advancing age and declining involvement, Michele's presence commanded respect. His reputation for intelligence, discretion, and strategic foresight made his counsel sought after by both senior and emerging figures. Even those who operated outside his direct mentorship recognized that his advice carried weight. Michele's influence was exercised not through intimidation or force but through respect earned. Over decades of successful leadership, quiet intervention, and consistent judgment, his legacy was visible in the organization's continued stability, operational resilience, and disciplined culture. Michele's approach during these final years emphasized long-term thinking. He reminded the family that decisions should prioritize enduring stability and cohesion over short-term gain or notoriety. By maintaining this philosophy, Michele reinforced the principles of measured action, patience, and foresight. He encouraged leaders to anticipate consequences, balance risk and reward, and preserve the organization's integrity in both operations and culture. This focus on sustainability ensured that the Genovese family would continue to operate effectively even in his absence. As the decade progressed, Michele's influence extended to shaping the family's approach to emerging challenges. While the world of organized crime was changing with new technologies, legal strategies, and societal shifts, Michele's guidance emphasized adaptability without compromising core values. He advised leaders to integrate modern methods of communication, finance, and management while upholding the discretion, loyalty, and strategic foresight that had defined the family's success. Michele's ability to balance tradition and innovation was a testament to his enduring relevance, even in semi-retirement. The late 1990s also highlighted Michele Miranda's subtle impact on culture and morale. His example of calm leadership, patience, and discretion reinforced the family's ethos. Members understood that real influence was exercised quietly through judgment and foresight rather than public recognition or force. Michele's presence reminded them that stability, loyalty, and strategic thinking were not only operational necessities but guiding principles for maintaining the family's cohesion and influence across generations. Reflecting on Michele Miranda's final years, it becomes clear that his enduring legacy was not measured in personal notoriety or dramatic displays of power. Instead, it was defined by the sustained stability, resilience, and strategic excellence of the Genovese family. Through mentorship, guidance, and discreet oversight, Michele ensured that the organization remained cohesive, disciplined, and influential, capable of navigating both internal and external challenges. His life exemplifies the enduring power of intelligence, patience, and subtle leadership in shaping the trajectory of one of the most formidable criminal organizations in American history. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's late 1990s years were characterized by quiet influence, reflective mentorship, and the culmination of a lifetime dedicated to preserving and guiding the Genovese family. His wisdom, discretion, and strategic insight ensured that even as he stepped back from daily operations, the family remained cohesive, operationally capable, and prepared for the future. Michele's legacy is a testament to the enduring strength of thoughtful, strategic leadership exercised quietly but decisively, shaping an organization that would carry forward his values and principles long after his final years. As the 1990s drew to a close and the new millennium approached, Michele Miranda's active involvement in the Genovese family had largely diminished. Age and health limited his participation in daily operations, yet his role as a guiding presence, mentor, and strategist remained pivotal. While the younger generation handled the operational and managerial responsibilities, Michele's counsel continued to influence high-level decisions, succession planning, and the preservation of the family's core values. Even in semi-retirement, his foresight and strategic vision helped prepare the organization for the rapidly changing world of law enforcement, technology, and internal dynamics. One of Michele's primary concerns during this period was ensuring that the transition of leadership to younger members was smooth and stable. He recognized that without careful succession planning, internal rivalries, or ambition could jeopardize the cohesion of the family. Michele assessed the capabilities, loyalty, and temperament of emerging leaders, guiding the elder members in distributing responsibilities and authority appropriately. His insight helped prevent disputes that could have fractured the organization, reinforcing a culture where strategic planning, loyalty, and rational decision-making were prioritized over impulsive action or ego. Federal law enforcement had, by the late 1990s, developed sophisticated investigative tools and strategies. Surveillance, electronic monitoring, and intelligence operations posed ongoing challenges to organized crime. Michele Miranda's decades of experience provided invaluable insight into mitigating these risks. He advised on the compartmentalization of operations, the insulation of leadership from direct involvement in high-risk activities, and the careful vetting of associates. Michele's strategic counsel ensured that the Genovese family could operate securely. Even in an era of intensified scrutiny and modernized law enforcement methods, mentorship continued to define Michele's contributions during these years. Though no longer directly managing day-to-day activities, he spent time guiding the next generation of leaders, emphasizing the importance of discretion, patience, and strategic foresight. Michele shared lessons learned from decades of navigating internal disputes, managing alliances, and countering federal investigations. By instilling these values, he ensured that the family's operational philosophy and culture would persist long after his final years. His mentorship reinforced not just skills, but the mindset necessary for sustained survival and success in the criminal underworld. Internal cohesion remained a priority for Michele Miranda. Even as his physical involvement declined, he monitored relationships, advised on disputes, and recommended solutions to prevent conflicts from escalating. His interventions were subtle yet effective, adjusting responsibilities, mediating disputes, and reinforcing the importance of loyalty and trust. Michele's calm, reasoned approach maintained morale and stability within the organization, demonstrating that leadership could be exercised through influence, strategy, and guidance, rather than direct control or visible authority. Michele's influence also extended to the family's relationships with external organizations. Alliances with other families and criminal networks required careful maintenance, negotiation, and occasional intervention to prevent conflicts. Michele's subtle guidance ensured that agreements were honored, disputes were resolved discreetly, and cooperative ventures were managed effectively. His diplomatic approach reinforced the family's reputation as a stable and influential organization, respected by allies and feared by potential adversaries alike. During this period, Michele also reflected on the evolution of organized crime and his own legacy. He had witnessed the rise and fall of powerful figures, the emergence of new criminal enterprises, and the evolution of law enforcement tactics over decades. Michele's reflections were not idle musings. They were practical lessons for the next generation. He emphasized the importance of foresight, adaptability, and discretion, underscoring that the survival of the organization depended on anticipating challenges, managing risks, and cultivating leaders capable of making rational, strategic decisions. Even in semi-retirement, Michele's reputation for intelligence, discretion, and strategic insight commanded respect. Senior figures consulted him on critical decisions while younger leaders sought his mentorship. Michele's quiet authority influenced choices across the organization, shaping policy, strategies, and operational practices without the need for direct involvement. His approach demonstrated that leadership is not necessarily defined by visibility or force, but by the enduring impact of wise, measured guidance. Michele Miranda's later years also highlighted his commitment to preserving the family's cultural and operational values. He emphasized discipline, loyalty, and strategic thinking as guiding principles. Members were reminded that impulsive actions, ego-driven decisions, or breaches of trust could undermine the organization's stability. Michele's example and mentorship reinforced these values, ensuring that the family's operations were conducted within a framework that prioritized cohesion, prudence, and long-term stability over immediate gain or notoriety. As the new millennium approached, Michele continued to guide the family's adaptation to changing circumstances. He advised on modernizing certain operational methods, integrating technological tools, and enhancing security protocols, all while maintaining the discretion and secrecy that had long been a hallmark of the organization. Michele's guidance enabled the Genovese family to embrace necessary change without compromising the foundational principles that had ensured its survival and dominance for decades. Michele Miranda's reflections on his life and career also extended to the concept of legacy. He understood that his influence would endure not in headlines or notoriety, but through the organization he had helped preserve, the leaders he had mentored, and the culture he had reinforced. His careful stewardship ensured that the Genovese family would remain cohesive, disciplined, and capable of navigating the challenges of the 21st century long after his final years of active involvement. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's final years exemplify the enduring power of quiet, strategic leadership. Even as he withdrew from operational activity, his influence continued to shape the family's decisions, culture, and stability. Michele's life is a testament to the principle that true authority is exercised through wisdom, foresight, and discretion, and that the most enduring impact often comes from those who guide without seeking recognition or spectacle. His legacy within the Genovese family and the broader underworld is defined not by violence or fame, but by the cohesion, resilience, and strategic excellence he cultivated over decades. In conclusion, Michele Miranda's late 1990s period represents a culmination of a lifetime spent shaping, guiding, and preserving one of the most powerful organized crime families in history. Through mentorship, strategic counsel, and the quiet reinforcement of values, he ensured that the family remained cohesive, resilient, and prepared for the challenges of a new era. Michele's story demonstrates that the true power of leadership lies not in visible dominance but in thoughtful, consistent, and strategic influence, the kind of influence that endures long after the individual has stepped back from the forefront. As the 1990s came to a close, Michele Miranda entered the final chapter of his life with the calm, deliberate presence that had characterized him for decades. The once active consigliere, who had guided the Genovese family through wars, federal prosecutions, and internal conflicts, now spent his remaining years reflecting on a life defined by strategy, discretion, and the quiet exercise of power. While his direct involvement in operations had long diminished, his influence remained profound. Michele's final days were not marked by spectacle or notoriety, but by contemplation, mentorship, and the assurance that the organization he had nurtured would endure into the new millennium. Michele's thoughts often turned to the lessons he had learned throughout his life in the underworld. He understood the delicate balance between loyalty and ambition, risk and prudence, secrecy and influence. Every decision, every intervention, had shaped the trajectory of the family, and Michele recognized that the survival and success of the Genovese family were a testament to the principles he had consistently applied: discretion, patience, foresight, and strategic thinking. He reflected on the countless situations in which calm judgment had averted crises, preserved alliances, or prevented internal collapse. Each of these moments, he knew, had reinforced the foundation of the organization. During his final days, Michele continued to provide counsel and guidance to the family's leadership, albeit in a limited and measured capacity. Though he no longer attended meetings or managed operations directly, his advice was sought and respected. He offered insights into potential risks, evaluated the capabilities of emerging leaders, and provided strategies for preserving both internal cohesion and external influence. His words carried the weight of decades of experience, and even in a quieter role, Michele's presence reassured the family that they were operating under the guidance of a master strategist. Michele also devoted time to mentoring the next generation of leaders, ensuring that the lessons of the past would carry forward. He spoke of the importance of understanding human nature, of anticipating both threats and opportunities, and of valuing discretion above all else. His guidance was not limited to operational knowledge. He emphasized character, judgment, and the ability to influence without visibility. Michele's mentorship reinforced the culture of the family, instilling in emerging leaders the principles that had ensured the organization's resilience for decades. Reflecting on his life, Michele considered the many challenges he had faced. From the early years of his rise within the Genovese family to the complex negotiations and strategic maneuvering of later decades, he had witnessed violence, betrayal, and the ever-present threat of law enforcement. Yet, through all of it, Michele had remained steadfast in his role as the Quiet Consigliere, exercising influence through intelligence, foresight, and discretion rather than spectacle. This consistency, he recognized, was what had allowed the family to endure, adapt, and thrive despite numerous threats. Internal cohesion was always a concern, and even in his final days Michele remained attentive to the relationships and dynamics within the family. He understood that ambition, jealousy, and conflict were natural human traits, but he also knew that without careful management they could destabilize the organization. Michele's advice on succession planning, dispute resolution, and responsibility allocation helped ensure that the family's hierarchy remained functional and respected. His subtle interventions, delivered with wisdom and tact, preserved loyalty and trust, even as he gradually withdrew from active participation. Michele's reflections also extended to external relations. The alliances and rivalries with other families that he had cultivated over decades required ongoing management. He recognized that the stability of these relationships was essential for the family's continued influence. Michele advised on negotiations, disputes, and cooperative ventures, ensuring that the Genovese family maintained its strategic advantages without unnecessary confrontation. His deep understanding of power dynamics and human behavior allowed the organization to navigate the complexities of the underworld with skill and discretion. Health and age limited Michele's direct involvement, but his intellectual engagement remained strong. He continued to analyze threats, evaluate strategic options, and consider the long-term trajectory of a family. Michele understood that the organization he had helped guide for decades would continue to face challenges, but he also trusted the systems, culture, and leadership he had nurtured. His confidence in the family's resilience reflected his lifelong commitment to foresight, strategic planning, and disciplined leadership. In these final years, Michele also contemplated the nature of legacy. Unlike many figures in organized crime, whose influence is measured by public notoriety or violent exploit, Michele's impact was defined by the cohesion, discipline, and strategic sophistication of the family. He understood that his true contribution lay not in fame but in the enduring strength and stability of the organization he had guided. Every decision, every counsel, and every lesson imparted to younger leaders contributed to a legacy that would outlast his life. Michele's presence, even in retirement, served as a model of leadership. He exemplified the principle that power does not need to be loud or visible to be effective. Influence could be exercised quietly, through foresight, reasoned judgment, and the careful shaping of people and operations. The Genovese family's continued success, even as the underworld evolved and federal scrutiny intensified, was a testament to Michele's enduring guidance and strategic mastery. As the final days approached, Michele Miranda's reflections carried a sense of completion. He had navigated decades of challenges, preserved the stability and influence of one of the most powerful organized crime families in American history, and imparted knowledge and values that would guide future generations. His life was a study in the quiet exercise of authority, the power of strategic foresight, and the importance of mentorship, discretion, and patience. Ultimately, Michele Miranda's final days were a fitting conclusion to a life spent shaping and guiding the Genovese family. His legacy is not measured by headlines or notoriety, but by the enduring strength, cohesion, and resilience of the organization he nurtured. Michele's influence continues to be felt through the leaders he mentored, the culture he reinforced, and the strategic principles he instilled, an enduring testament to the quiet power of a masterful consigliere. As the story of Michele Miranda reaches its conclusion, it is essential to reflect on the life and legacy of a man whose influence in the underworld was unmatched, not through violence or spectacle, but through intelligence, discretion, and strategic foresight. From his early years to his final days, Michele exemplified the role of the consigliere in its purest form, a masterful guide, mediator, and strategist whose quiet presence shaped the Genovese family for decades. His life offers a profound lesson in leadership, the enduring power of patience, and the subtle, transformative impact of strategic thinking. Michele's journey began with a careful, deliberate rise through the ranks of the Genovese family. Unlike more flamboyant or notorious figures, he relied on intelligence, observation, and calculated action to secure his place. He understood that influence did not require public attention but demanded trust, discretion, and loyalty. Michele's ascent to consigliere was the result of decades of consistent judgment, the ability to resolve disputes, and the skill to navigate the intricate dynamics of the underworld. By earning the respect of both peers and rivals, he became the quiet backbone of one of America's most powerful crime families. Throughout his life, Michele Miranda demonstrated the true essence of strategic leadership. He understood that the survival and success of the family depended on foresight, careful planning, and the ability to balance risk with opportunity. He managed internal disputes, advised on succession, and guided operations with a focus on long-term stability rather than short-term gain. Michele's influence was subtle yet profound. His counsel shaped critical decisions, ensured operational security, and preserved the cohesion of the organization through decades of external pressure and internal ambition. Michele's role as a mediator and stabilizer was central to his effectiveness. The underworld was rife with conflict, from territorial disputes to disagreements over leadership and operational control. Michele's ability to resolve disputes without resorting to unnecessary violence or creating fractures within the family preserved both trust and loyalty. His calm, measured approach ensured that decisions were made thoughtfully, minimizing impulsive actions that could endanger the organization. In this way, Michele's quiet influence maintained order and cohesion, a hallmark of his decades-long service. Mentorship was another defining feature of Michele's legacy. He recognized that the family's future depended on cultivating competent, disciplined leaders who understood both the operational and cultural principles of the organization. Michele guided younger members in strategic thinking, decision-making, and negotiation, emphasizing discretion, patience, and loyalty. By instilling these values, he ensured that the Genovese family would continue to operate effectively even as older leaders retired or faced legal challenges. Michele's mentorship extended beyond skill building. It reinforced a culture of strategic foresight and respect for the organization's traditions. Michele's strategic vision was evident in how he navigated external threats. Federal law enforcement and RICO prosecutions increasingly targeted organized crime throughout the latter half of the 20th century. Michele's guidance focused on mitigating exposure, compartmentalizing operations, and insulating leadership from high-risk activities. By anticipating legal strategies and advising on operational security, he allowed the family to maintain profitability and influence despite unprecedented scrutiny. Michele's ability to foresee challenges and advise discreetly was a testament to unparalleled understanding of both the criminal and legal landscapes. Beyond the operational and strategic dimensions, Michele's impact on the family's culture was profound. He reinforced the principles of loyalty, trust, and discipline, ensuring that members understood the importance of measured, rational decision-making. Michele's emphasis on these values created an environment in which impulsive actions, ego, or betrayal were discouraged, and where the long-term stability of the organization took precedence over short-term gain. His influence fostered a disciplined, cohesive organization that could withstand both internal and external pressures. Diplomacy was another crucial element of Michele's leadership. He skillfully managed relationships with other families and criminal networks, preventing conflicts, negotiating alliances, and ensuring cooperative ventures succeeded without jeopardizing the family's interests. Michele's understanding of human behavior, power dynamics, and negotiation allowed him to maintain the family's influence and strategic advantage. This quiet diplomacy reinforced the family's reputation for stability, strategic competence, and enduring authority within the criminal underworld. As Michele entered the final decades of his life, his focus shifted increasingly toward reflection and the preservation of his legacy. While his active involvement in operations declined, his wisdom continued to guide high-level decisions and influence emerging leaders. Michele's life exemplified the power of subtle authority, the ability to shape outcomes, cultivate loyalty, and ensure organizational resilience without relying on intimidation or public recognition. His guidance ensured that the family remained cohesive, disciplined, and strategically positioned well into the 21st century. Michele Miranda's final years were marked by contemplation of a life spent mastering the art of leadership in the shadows. He recognized that true influence is rarely visible. It manifests in the cohesion, resilience, and effectiveness of those guided by it. Michele's enduring impact is evident not in headlines or fame but in the sustained stability and strategic success of the Genovese family. Through decades of service, he demonstrated that leadership founded on intelligence, discretion, and foresight could outlast violence, notoriety, and external threats. Ultimately, the legacy of Michele Miranda is one of quiet power, strategic mastery, and enduring influence. He exemplified the ideal of the consigliere, a figure whose authority derives not from spectacle or fear, but from wisdom, judgment, and the ability to guide others toward prudent, disciplined, and strategic action. His life offers a profound lesson in the enduring value of patience, foresight, and mentorship, showing that the most impactful leaders often operate in the shadows, shaping outcomes with subtlety and precision. Michele Miranda's story concludes not with dramatic events or sensational headlines, but with the knowledge that the Genovese family he helped guide remained resilient, cohesive, and strategically adept. His influence, mentorship, and strategic guidance ensured that the family could navigate challenges, adapt to changing times, and maintain its power and authority. Michele's life stands as a testament to the quiet yet extraordinary power of intelligence, discretion, and foresight, a legacy that continues to resonate in the annals of organized crime history. In the end, Michele Miranda's life reminds us that true leadership is measured not by public recognition or act, of violence, but by the enduring stability, cohesion, and resilience of the organization or people one serves. Through decades of meticulous guidance, strategic thinking, and quiet mentorship, Michele left an indelible mark on the Genovese family and the wider world of organized crime. His story is one of calm authority, thoughtful action, and the remarkable power of a life led with intelligence, discretion, and unwavering judgment.